Plus, Ultra presents The Grey Lodge. Freak 93. Magic in Theory and Praxis. Practice, not praxis. Liber New, Part 1. Hosted by me, Jin the Ninja, who has a show called Threshold Saints, who just dropped an episode by Andrew Edwards and has 2 episodes with his fellow brother and co-host Solar Exile coming up next week on the 9th and the 14th with Gregory Peters, author of New Aeon Tantra, and of course our friend of the show, Paul Frederick, who hosts the Demonosophy podcast. So we've got that fucking going on. So that's really exciting, and I've got tons of episodes coming out with obviously Joshua. I've got one with Matt. I need to finalize the schedule. Just so much going on. It's like crazy, but it's great. It's also great because, as some of you may know, few of the brothers went and repped for the Grey Lodge, spoke to the great David Rankin as well as Ike Baker. They kind of knew who we were. So, fuck yeah. You know, like, I'm not saying like they're like my hero or anything. They're not my hero, but it's cool. It's cool to meet other magicians in the new fucking Aeon, right? So we're on an app called X. That both the 10 and the 11, we're surfing the Aether wave as Quicksilver surfers with the ideal love as the cause of knowledge. There are of course 3 Aeons: love, will, and life. I know people think it sounds cheese, but it's not really, if you understand. So I think that we should probably live out those Aeonic ideals the best we can, and obviously in the space, everything we say or everything we discuss is speculative, 100% speculative, but also magic is motherfucking real. So welcome to the threshold of the Grey Lodge. And we are listening to Guru Padmasambhava 7-line Vajra prayer, as well as a dark ambient sort of Bonpo core. I don't really know how else to describe it, but something like that. And anyways, I'm really glad that you all are here. I'm hoping that Solar comes back and is not just like lost in the Aether wave, because it's been a while since the 5 of us were really able to do this all together. I know we took a break last week, and it wasn't for any bad reason. It was because last week was my birthday, and I get a little emo, but that's okay, but it wasn't really because of that either. The reason I took a break was because I had 5 recordings that weekend scheduled that I didn't even schedule. People wanted to record with me, so you have to say yes when people ask. So I needed to save my voice. I needed to sort of gather my thoughts, get my shit. I'm hitting the mala. So today I was actually doing sadhana, and I was thinking to myself, Dharma is so fucking profound. It is so simple and it's so profound. You sit there with your mala, your mantra, and your mind, and you just fucking do it. And honestly, it is like, it's almost better than sex. Almost. Maybe sometimes it's as good. I don't know, but it's really good. It's very good. It's so clarifying, and like it just changes the whole day. And so that has to come first. So sometimes we might do that, or someone else might take over. But I just have to make sure, because I'm recording so much, and also we're around all. It's not that any of us are bad or anything like that. But when you're around other people and they're we're all in the ghost world, right? We're on Twitter, we're on X, we're all in the ghost world. We're silver surfing through the ghost worlds right now. You are going to pick up aggregations. You are going to pick up debris. You are going to pick up other people's perceptions. You are going to pick up negative vibes. We were talking about this. Mike brought it up in the chat. It's not necessarily tied to astrology per se, but if people feel on the timeline, if people feel like there's a negative vibe, of course they're going to manifest the negative vibe. Just like I just thought it was funny, and I'm not shitting on that account, I won't say which one it is, but that person does really struggle with their health, mental health, we'll call it. And I'm just going to say, like, I don't know if that is like the arbiter of like good vibe versus bad vibe, because I'm not sure at that point you can distinguish it. I'm not making fun of them. I'm just saying, like I can tell there's a vibe. I can tell there's a very strong martial and like a fiery energy, elemental fire energy. I can feel it. It's a fire puja day. It says so on the calendar, and I can also feel it. I don't even need to look at the calendar. I can tell you there's an overbearance of fire. But that's what makes it a great fire puja day, because instead, fire is the primordial element. So what you do is you take the time when it is the most active, the most rajasic, the most transformative, and you utilize it. That's the whole point, because you're trying to portion out the elemental circumstances in the world to sort of renew what's called yang, which is like the vital force, the energy, the ley lines. You're trying to resolve all of that, but not necessarily all over the world, but you're going to utilize a circumstance to do so through fire. And it's interesting because the full moon was a perfect elemental proportional harmony day, or whatever. I'm not saying it very well, but all the elements were in portion. So that means that the full moon actually was very well balanced, that all the sort of elemental harmonies were well met. That if you decided to practice sadhana yesterday, it was actually very auspicious, and it was particularly auspicious for Amitabha, the great Buddha of the West, the Buddha who is associated with fire. It's very interesting, because we always talk about this in relationship to like Yesod and to Babylon and to the daughter and all of that, and how she arises from the heatless flame. Like that's what the whole point of the mythic kind of Gnostic, speculative Gnostic framework that we use is, so you can understand it in the smaller grammatical ritual components and say, okay, what does it mean by heatless fire? It means I have to bring all the elements into portion, into a balance in and of myself. Everybody has a certain elemental predisposition. Barden talks about this, right? We talked about this in all the Barden spaces that we did, and all of them, and many of them. And so we kind of rectify. That's the whole point of Yesod, it's the point of rectification, because it also is your own mind. It's like what Matt Moura always says, like, that's a you problem. So you better resolve that in your own mind first. Now, if you resolve it in your own mind and it's still a problem, then that might be a more technically difficult resolution. But at least start in your own mind. The vibe begins in your own mind. That's Yasodic consciousness. This is why a lot of quote unquote spiritual people have crash outs, because they live in Yasodic consciousness. We've talked about this many times. It is a fundamentally interesting place to reside, but it is not. It's not the when you're engaging with social media, you're engaging with people. That is not the path of the saint, because you're picking up their aggregates. If you're just a saint in the, whatever, in like 15th century, like Siberia, and you're like riding your donkey to like Baikal, like your life is going to be a lot less affected by sort of like the nature of the world, which is of course both a carnal ground and a garden. But like, hopefully you recognize that. But that's what a saint is supposed to be doing. It's not someone's supposed to be like deep in social media trying to like launch a semi-successful like indie occult I don't know what are we doing, Matt? Like India, we're we're meta magicians. We're like chaos magicians, kind of attacking the consensus reality, but not in the with the hope of destruction, with the hope of renewal, generation, being generative in the silver age. So that's basically where we're at. I am a little. I'm he's driving, and so I'm sure it's like annoying for him to come back. Obviously, he is the king of book club, Solar. So I hope he does pop back in. But if he does not, I will try and carry us through the book. I'll actually read the poem. So the previous space that we just tried to do like a few minutes ago, I was talking about how I was going to read the poem right at the intro, like Crowley's poem, right at the beginning. So the problem with Crowley's poem is it's so fucking hilarious and so full of sexual innuendo that when I tried reading it pre-recording, I actually couldn't stop laughing because it's quite filthy. So we'll see if I get through it, but I think it'll be amusing nonetheless. And I think it'll be a good introduction because, like, come on, I'm like the least pagan of all of us, probably. And so for me to read like the Pan Invocation, I think it's just cherry. It's just like it's so perfect. So that being said, of course, we have the five brothers: Mike, Joshua the Branch, Matt Moura, Solar Exile. I'm so happy they're all here. I'm so excited to do this. Last week was 1 week too long. I actually sat on the Friday and was like, I fucking miss doing that. I was like, I actually miss doing it. I complain about it. I might say, oh, it's like so much work. I have to do the keynote. I have to do the promotion. I have to think about like what we're going to talk about. I have to prepare some notes. I have to prepare some ideas. I have to get ready, as John would say, for the flow. I have to, I have, and then plus I have actual like life things to do. So sometimes I'm like, it's so much, but then I realize like actually there's something so edifying and gratifying and also like incredible that we have been drawn to each other in a collective, in a node. I'm not saying forever. I'm not saying like any obligation or anything like that. As we joke, this is not the Temple of Psychic Youth. Psionic, maybe, but it's not we're not redoing, we're not we was kanging 1993. We're moving forward. We're moving forward in the Aeon, and we're in a middle path positionality. That doesn't mean you always have to be middle path, and it doesn't mean you reject left hand path either. But it also doesn't mean that you have to be ascetic trad larp, right? But you can also draw ideas from there too. It's like a very synthetic and rectified Aeon if you choose to go with the Aeonic ideas, love, will, and life. How do we affirm those? How do we generate those? And how do we sort of apply those ideals to the greater meta? I think that's the question. So I'm gonna let everybody introduce themselves, but we'll do a little quickie room shout out. I think that's always, people love that. Wit Scott, thank you so much. Longtime mutual. I think Jin appreciator. I think I can very happily say. Avi, Bullbray Free, thank you so much. Longtime lodge member. Very much obliged to see you here. Thank you. Common consent. Thank you. Prometheus. I guess we're long time mutuals, maybe. I don't really recognize you, but long time mutuals it seems like. And I am glad to see you here. And maybe you're an alt. I don't know. But yeah, welcome, Cassandra. Of course, our longtime lodge member. Even though Cassandra wasn't technically in the GC for a while, we had to let her work out she had to fight she had to reveal the Crystal Millennium Kingdom a little on the timeline, and then what? But I've been friends with Cassandra at least on the timeline, so parasocial friends, but friends nonetheless. We've been friends for over 2 years, so we made it work, even though we were a little different politically. But then we kind of were like, yeah, that shit's all retarded. So let's actually like move forward and like actually like look at each other and say we're actually very similar. So let's move forward with that. That's a much more aeonic thing than saying, oh, let's get fixed in preconception of what my like political opinion was like 6 months ago, which is no longer even the same. Like who the fuck cares? Like I don't care anymore. So I never really cared, and I think you all know that. It's not that I don't care; it's that I'm just looking. We're looking for generation. So that's all I'll say. Um, so thank you, Cassandra. Everybody check out Cassandra's Etsy and her own content creation, of course. Frau Blucher, thank you so much. Bad Wolfen, I know I'm terrible at German. I'm not even going to pretend. Thank you so much, fellow poet, I would say, on the timeline. We're also very, I think, interested in this concept of love and what it is and how it exists in the emptiness of space, of course. Leo, one of my longest time mutuals. People act like I don't remember when I add them, but actually I do. And I was joking in the chat when I said I used to follow everyone back. I would follow people back if I thought that they would have something interesting to say, but I will say, like, there are so many people that are particularly memorable who I am mutuals with. So it's not like I don't have a big friend group. You all know this, like the group chat and then individually maybe, but outside of that I'm not in anything. I'm not not talking to anyone. So this is something I talked about with Greg K on the upcoming episode, which has a great title, by the way. Good job, Jen. As always, of course. But he was like, social media is so cool because he has this huge Telegram group, but it is so alienating at the same time. And even though I'm like, I try and be so Aeon pause, so to speak, and I am, because honestly, I believe it. Obviously, you don't have to believe it, but I believe it. I really believe I'm 122% in, we'll say. But it is alienating, and it is lonely, and it is cutthroat, especially in podcasting. And I'm not complaining about anyone in particular, but like people will set you up to fail. Like I didn't really realize it until now. So I just wanted to say that that's what I'm trying to say. I'm not trying to complain about anything. I'm not. I don't want to be in a position to complain. I'm very lucky. I'm very lucky to have the show that I have. I'm very lucky that we do this show together and that I can wrangle, the, as I like to call them, the scions and the misfits all together, and that we all come together in sort of consent and do this. It's it's almost like I don't want to use like a very new age or uh, you know, like esoteric Twitter word, but it is wonderful, and also it is a blessing in a way to come back after COVID, to go through all the cognitive and mental gates that we went through, and still be lost in the ghost world, still be lost in the tunnels, because that's how I feel sometimes. But you know what? We come back. I know I have to air episodes of the show. I know I have to do the spaces. So it kind of gives it coherence. We talk a lot about this, like pink as a color of coherence, and pink in and of itself isn't a coherent color. So it just is interesting that friendship is kind of in that pink ray. It's a pink and green ray, and like, what do you make of it? What do you do with it? So I think that that's about what it's about. It's about like high openness, being generative. That's something I stole from Solar, by the way. High openness, because I'm not from a high openness culture. It's hard for me. I actually have to go outside of myself a little bit to, um, you know, say specific things. I know you think I'm like, oh, Jin's fiery. He says whatever the fuck he wants. Yeah, I am. I'm very mercenary, but in terms of like my private opinions or my private life, it's not that I want to share my private life. I'm not even talking about that, but I just mean in the greater thing. Like, how much do you share? How much feelings do you share? How much feelings are real? How much feelings are, to quote Madigan, my own fucking problem? Just an idea. Just something to think about. Okay, then we have Truth and Dies, Vanessa, Etsy. So make sure to check out our Etsy store. And Fluxion, who's comes all the way from Finland to listen to us in recording. And of course, I'm going to let the boys go. I know I said I wouldn't do an intro, but there you fucking go. Okay, Mike, you go for it first.
Hey, you guys, what's up? Glad to be back. I didn't read the book today, so I am not gonna add too much. If there's something relevant, I'll add, but I am looking forward to hearing what everyone else has to say. And last book club was really interesting because of Solar. He's very good at synthesizing information. So I'm interested to hear about that. But I do stuff with esoteric things, and I dabble here and there, and I try to add it into whatever I'm doing practically. But that's my background. And anyway, glad to be here. And there's solar. Um, yeah, that's it.
Awesome. Okay, so there we go. Solar Exile. Thank you so much. Came back so we can actually do the book. Even though I was gonna do the book by myself, but I'm glad I don't have to. It's a big relief. Okay, Joshua the Branch, go for it, buddy.
Hey guys, Shabbat Shalom. It's nice to be here tonight, and fellowship with you all. So I haven't read the book either, so I probably won't be chiming in as much either, like Mike said. But but at any rate, it's a pleasure to share time and space with you all. Thank you so much for being here. Also, Spotify. I have a Spotify account, and today they did like a year in review thing, and Threshold Saints was my number two podcast next to like a geopolitical thing I listen to every day. So it ranked up there pretty high for me. I just thought I'd remind everybody that you can check out some of the new episodes that have dropped for Jin's Threshold Saints on Spotify. So yeah, thanks for hosting, guys.
Thank you so much for saying that, Joshua. It is you guys that make the show, obviously. You're not only like the co-host of the Grey Lodge, you're co-hosts in on Threshold Saints, and that's why the show kept going. The show kept going because of the Grey Lodge. The show kept going because of in particular, it's not because Mike didn't lend himself, he did, but it was Solar, Matt, and Joshua that kept everything going when I didn't know if I wanted to or could. But we did, and then it all turned out. It all turned out to be very interesting, as they say. So, Matt, Moura, please introduce yourself, plug whatever you want, and then I'll let Solar do the same.
Hello, very glad to be here. Just a quick introduction for whoever don't know me yet. Matt Moura 19 on all socials. That is Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Twitch, maybe some other place that I didn't enter yet, but I will someday. And you can also find me on my website. A lot of cool stuff going on there. That's Kabbalah.com, KAABALAH.com. And as always, our website, The True Grey Lodge with a V, so the True Grey Lodge.com. Also, we always post the recordings there and our operations as the host. So either on Threshold Saints or might appear in conjunction. So me and the other host, we are always going to put there as well. So very glad to do a book today. Let's see how it goes.
Thank you so much for saying that, Matt, about our website and our YouTube channel. Of course, I totally forgot. Duh. I guess being a little out of practice, I guess is not. My memory was lapsed. So we'll call it old age. So, yeah, basically check us out, thetruegraylodge.com, TRVE. It was my birthday, Solar, last week. I'm just saying. So I'm a year older. So I have I don't know if a year, but I feel old. So thetruegraylodge.com. Check us out there. Of course, YouTube, like and subscribe. It really helps because obviously the algorithm has been against. I don't know if against us, but against me. And so even though I had 2 viral tweets, big deal. They were just like Kino, Buddhist Kino, which is good, useful. Like we want visibility, but I want visibility for all of us and all of our ideas. So, I'm gonna let Solar go because he didn't really get a proper intro at the very beginning because he dropped. But he has 2 episodes, great episodes, probably the strongest episodes I've done, with anyone to date. But also like just showing the strength of like our ideas that we've talked about collectively. So the 9th and the 14th, look out for those. Solar, please go ahead.
Yeah, man, that's exciting stuff. and I really appreciate the opportunity to be able to contribute on those episodes. I think we did something cool. Yeah, I for one could do without the visibility, so you guys go ahead and enjoy all of that. Yeah, Solar Exile, nothing else to plug. I do some balance of awareness-based practices, Chen or something similar to that, and then sort of contemporary left-hand path stuff. Yeah, happy to be here. My participation will be a little bit intermittent tonight. I am cruising around the upper Midwest, working on a weekend, because winter do be like that sometimes. But yeah, still happy to be here. I did enjoy the book, although it's been a few months. So now I'm kind of, I had to do a crash course in my own book, so to speak. But yeah, happy to be here tonight, guys.
Well, let me be clear. I don't want visibility either. But what I do want is I want people to listen to the show and listen to our show. So if that's I didn't mean it in a personal. I don't want fame. I'm happy in the woods. I'm like that's I'm good without life. But I'm just saying it is nice that people recognize us and listen to the show. And like Greg K said, it was the most cutting edge thing he's heard in probably 30 years. So that is a huge compliment. And it's not just a compliment to me because it like who I am is informed by like the five of you and then also like our group chat. And like I said, it's not like my circle is big. It's my circle is the group chat and all of you. So that has informed me the most, and I actually find it the most edifying and the most interesting among all the magicians that I've met lately. I think the things that we talk about are like light years almost. I'm not saying it's all like perfect or like my Kabbalah is perfect. Everybody knows I'm like shit at Hebrew. My Sanskrit's like wanting. My Chinese is lacking. Yeah, I know. But I also think like we've done some really interesting things. So like we should. I like that we get at least indie recognition for that. So that makes me happy. So I want to special shout out to our brother Moonblade, who is technically well, I call them the junior co-hosts. They're like the Zoomer co-hosts. But yeah, we love them. Him and Leo and Seth. They always they're just they're great follows. Everybody follow them. I just think they're great follows. I just think they're great kids. Like legit. They're funny. Okay, yeah, Solar, please, sorry, go ahead.
No. I just wanted to say, since we're shouting out Moonblade, I feel like he kind of got fucked. He got paid, but he produced some really awesome illustrations for a piece that I commissioned that ended up kind of dying on the vine because the editor just like bailed on the whole project. Not like my piece specifically, but just kind of. I don't want to shout out who it is because it's a big name in our space, but he just seemed to kind of walk away from the fucking magazine. So until I place that piece, no one else is going to get to see Moonblade's work, which is the real shame of the whole thing, because it was awesome. Can't recommend his graphic skills enough. But anyway, man, just like he's a really talented dude, and that's not an aspect of like his persona that I had ever heard about before I was tipped onto it. So just putting it out there.
That's what I like about you, Solar. You're so kind to them, and I appreciate that. You're the unk where they don't treat me like that. But the I guess you have to start. You have to do a Grey Lodge. You better start print. We better chip in. I guess Daddy Jin's buying us indie printing press for Christmas because I guess we need our own occult e-zine or like zine or whatever. So I'm serious, kind of. Like I'm not unserious. I know Matt would be down. I see 100% from Joshua. So you know, Matt and I had a business meeting this week. How funny is that? I know everybody's like, what? No, it was just like it's like where we're going and like what our direction is and what our like game plan is if we have one, if we don't, if we're just going like Silver Surfer, like you know, Cabalist on the Aether wave or Scions on the Aether. And Matt and I have a lot in common in this weird way, but it's like I think it's difficult for us to like say specifics, but it's just like we just kind of get it, and we're just like, yeah, it's very calm. We're very calm. one of the only people I get to be like 100% chill. Anyways, so I thought to intro the book. Yes, it is a filthy poem. So I'm just gonna say that it's full of sexual innuendo. It is, and I'm probably going to laugh. I'm gonna try not to, and I won't do super deadpan, but I'll, maybe not super colorful either, because I'll have to listen to this in recording. So I thought we'd open up with the invocation of Pan. We'll see how this goes. Thrill with lissome lust of the light, oh man, my man, come careering out of the night of Pan, Eopan. Eopan, Eopan, come over the sea, from Sicily and from Arcady, roaming as Bacchus with fauns and pards, and nymphs and satyrs for thy guards. On a milk-white ass come over the sea, to me. Come with Apollo in a bridal dress, shepherdess and pythoness. Come with Artemis, silken shod, and wash thy white thigh, O beautiful God. In the moon of the wood on the marble mount, the dimpled dawn of the amber fount, dip the purple of the passionate prayer in the crimson shrine, the scarlet snare, the soul that startles in eyes of blue to watch the wantonness weeping through the tangled grove, the gnarled bole of the living tree that is spirit and soul, and body and brain come over the sea. Eopan, Eopan, devil or god, to me, my man. Come with trumpets sounding shrill over the hill. Come with drums low muttering from the spring. Come with flute and come with pipe. I can't read the next line, I have to skip it. I who wait and writhe and wrestle with air that hath no boughs to nestle, my body weary of empty clasp, strong as a lion and sharp as an asp. Come, oh come, I am numb with the lonely lust of devildom. Thrust the sword through the galing fetter, all devourer, all begetter. Give me the sign of the open eye, and the token erect of the thorny thigh, and the word of madness and mystery. O Pan, Eopan, 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 Pan. I am a man. Do as thou wilt, as a great God can. O Pan, Eopan, 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 Pan. I am awake in the grip of the snake. The eagle flashes with beak and claw. The gods withdraw. The great beasts come, Eopan. I am born to death on the horn of the unicorn. I I am Pan, Eopan, Eopan, Pan. I am thy mate, I am thy man, goat of the flock, I am gold, I am God, flesh to thy bone, flower to thy rod, with hooves of steel I race on the rocks, through solstice stubborn to thy equinox, and I rave and I rape and I rip and I rend, everlasting world without end, mannequin, maiden, maenad, man, in the might of Pan, Eopan, Eopan, Pan, Eopan. Okay, so why did I humiliate myself by doing a dramatic reading? Well, this actually is part of what Crowley talks about in the book. I think the second chapter. It's called "What Is a Ritual." This might be in the first chapter, but in my notes I didn't denotate it properly. So he says what the third kind of ritual is actually the dramatic. So it's just like what we've talked about many times. Like the way you live your life is your greatest ritual. Like your outer performance of things is your greatest ritual. So we've kind of shifted in our, maybe not shifted, but I think that there's a kind of way to like reconcile this with the dramatic. So if everything is a theatrical production, obviously like the Puranas do posit that. Buddhism, Dharma posits that. By the way, I love Dharma again. I'm so in love with Dharma. I'm just saying, by the way. Just I was talking a little bit about this before, Solar, that when you came. And I just was saying, like, if it's so simple in a way, that's just like your mala, your mind, and your mantra. Like, you can just hit it sometimes. Anyways, but so that is kind of the outer performance as well. So I think that there's an interesting idea that if we live in the great play, we live in the divine play, but it doesn't necessarily mean everything is fated or scripted out. Yes, Solar, please go ahead.
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to mention. So I would rather endure a non-significant or a non-trivial amount of physical pain than be forced to listen to end-rhymed, horny ritual language for an extended period of time. Okay, like I do not enjoy that. Um, and so, and I'm sure like a lot of people don't, right? So, where am I going with this? Other than to like again, just like kind of make jokes at Carly's expense, is to kind of point out that for better or worse, and I would say like worse on the whole, like the English language has been largely desacralized, like especially in the 20th and continuing through the 21st century. Like we don't take our sort of our poetic form seriously anymore. Like all of the quote unquote contemporary, like modern, and then like later sort of innovations like on that have sort of like decontextualized, like sort of like deconstructed the idea of heightened or sacred speech, right? And so it's really, again, if we want to have access to that sort of like ritual performance, that sort of like third type or third method through which we can approach the divine and achieve union with the daimon, or however we want to say that, which is considered to be one of the most direct and potent forms of that, as well as kind of interesting sort of philosophically in the Layla and all that stuff. We have to innovate, right? Like we have to find our own ways to sacralize language. We have to be able to sort of assert and defend meaning for ourselves. Like we have to sort of build up our own sort of sacred languages in order to make that work. Because certainly for me, I can't crack open like one of Crowley's like weird like ritual psychodramas and get anything out of that other than extreme cringe, right? But that's okay. Like it may have worked in that moment in that time for them. But yeah, it's again like the onus is on us to sort of revive or restore access to that as a method, right? That doesn't mean that it's not viable just because we have to do that work.
That was a great point. I could not agree more. It is just cringe, 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 cringe all the way down. And like I like Austin Osman's Spare, but like in his poetry is like quite a bit better than Crowley's. I'm not really a big fan of whatever that is. But I totally agree. I would be interested in hearing like what your sort of diagnosis or prescription of like. Do you have a ritual language in mind that like people could use that isn't like cringe, or should we just revive it as in like the primordial word we can revive using the practices?
Yeah, well, you know, my approach is always going to be like chaos magic informed, right? Like, so I'm going to want to strip things down to like the absolute, like bare, like what feels sort of loaded and potent, like for the individual, and then say, okay, well, you're going to have that. You have to build up from that and with that, right? Like, there's nothing external. And again, like, he kind of gets into this and talking about like the barbarous names and stuff, right? Like, perhaps there's something about like uttering the specifically in that it's like an assault on reason. One, so you're sort of like disciplining your rational skeptical mind that wants to like detach you from that experience, but then also there's something like exotic, that it's foreign and unknown, right? Like it's beyond the sort of like horizons of the dualistic rational mind, right? And so like whatever exists sort of beyond that horizon for you specifically is probably like where you should look first, right? Something that is enchanted for you, something that could, and again, that's completely idiosyncratic, right? So like, what speaks to me, in a given moment, because my shit changes, every other week, right? But either way, like that probably has no bearing on like what is going to get you there, right? There are probably like certain like shared like symbolic systems, right? That work for a large number of people. And if you resonate with one of those systems, right? Like if like, wow, okay, like this sort of like school of tantric initiation and blah blah blah, this language like that, if that is like calling to you, if that glimmers as something that has that potential, well, there it is, right? You can use a system that other people have developed, worked on, blah blah blah. But like you have to have that pre-rational resonance with it in order for it to have like the magical like potency at all.
I actually totally agree with you. I like that we're kind of like and yes, I know your shit changes every week. I hear about it. Like, I mean, you tell me, you're like, I'm into this thing. I'm learning this language. I'm doing this. I'm like Indiana Jonesing over here, and I'm like, what? I don't even like. I barely can keep up with my own shit. But it's great. It's really great. It's like the intellectual challenge that I often need. So I have to agree that like it does kind of all come down to like chaos magic, just adding in a few bits. Like there's just a few kind of like I think cosmological components that it requires, and then it becomes like a almost like a dharmic vehicle. That's kind of how I'm thinking. This might be crazy, and this will probably get me in trouble, but whatever. Anyways, Joshua, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Well, before we get too far away from the poem, I wanted to just make a comment on what insights I had from that. He kind of compares. Well, he's talking about the goat so much, of course, but he hints at the sea or the ocean, and so I was kind of thinking of Capricorn, and so you don't normally think of Pan as Capricorn, but I think it's kind of in that same energetic field in a sense. And it's in subtle ways too. And of course, I'm a bit prudish like you, but for the sake of argument, we do refer to what is it, horny goat weed, is a plant that's kind of like an aphrodisiac of sorts. And then, of course, colloquially, you can even refer to an erection as a boner, which is Saturnian, in terminology. So I think these are some subtle hints to the Capricornian influence on sexuality, for that matter. And I wouldn't normally draw those comparisons, but just because you read that poem, I wanted to kind of highlight those. But furthermore, it's in terms of magic and which languages might be effective. I mean, you even see African people in their own native dialects achieving some degree of success with their magic rituals, like when they make grass skirts dance around and stuff like that. So I think that the reason that you got to use what vibes with you is because, just like with the zodiacs, everybody's a little bit different in terms of their composition. Maybe what works for that person is, that combination of neural pathways in their brain. And so when a certain word or thing evokes a certain pathway in the brain, that's what we're actually, tapping into maybe when, in terms of effectiveness, right? So maybe that's why, native languages and things like that unlock what they might refer to as like DNA memory or something. Because sometimes genetic expression comes out under certain conditions. And so there could be bijous or bijas or whatever that they're like syllables and sounds. They might kind of go along with our DNA in certain ways, but that could be specific to a certain region, or something like that. And so that could account for a lot of the different developments of dialects and languages. But the last point I wanted to make was that maybe the reason we make a big emphasis here on incoherent speech or whatever in that regard is it's kind of challenges order. So I'd see any established language that we can kind of reference as being like a representation of order of the logos. And so babble or incoherent speech would be the disorder, or backwards speech or anything like that would be something symbolic of Babylon or Babel, kind of reference the Tower of Babel story. So I just kind of wanted to highlight those aspects, and and thank you.
Thanks, Joshua. I'm going to let Matt go right away. Matt Moura, please go ahead.
Yeah, just to quickly riff off what Joshua was talking about. If you want to be nitpicky about it, let's say you say, okay, no, Hebrew is the magical language and I have to use Hebrew. Sure, but especially if I'm not a native speaker, I'm definitely not going to speak like someone who was born and is speaking that language since they were born are going to speak. Like I'm going to have an accent. So then should we take that into consideration, for example? Because then it will be literally a different frequency when speaking it. So I'm completely agree with Joshua in the sense that you gotta take what works for you, and you can only know that by experimenting, right? And I find it interesting, this idea of the magical language as well. We can see it in like I think it's English. It's also going to be called glossolalia. Like we have in Brazil, like the evangelicals. I think they're going to be called Protestants in English or whatever. But basically, they have this whole thing of like they starting. I think it's speaking in tongues. Exactly, that's the thing. So this whole idea again of speaking the thing you kind of don't even understand it, and I guess that also helps with it being more magical. It's going to be very different if I go and bless you by saying, "Oh, bless you," and if I say something like "Hashra," and then you get, "Oh my God, it's a magical thing." So it definitely plays out with this whole mystical way of putting it as well. If you want to play with that.
I agree with there are elements I agree with because I am a Kabbalah appreciator, as nobody who obviously has ever spoken to me for more than 10 minutes can avoid knowing. But also, I actually like Dharma's resolution to this. That just the word is primordially empty, that we can rectify it, we can resurrect it, and we can resolve it and all paradox that arises therein. Because what is emptiness? Emptiness is luminousness and masslessness, and it is a bit chaotic and disordered. It can be, but you can also bring it into synthesis. So you can bring it into coherence. How aggregated is it? So, yeah, I think Dharma does this really well. I think Tantra does this really well. I think that's the whole principle. It's like, how do we create the logos? Well, the logos is also considered to be arising in of yourself. Now, who is yourself? This is the question. What is yourself? Right? Is it fixed? Is it eternal? Is it non-dual? Is it a weird combination of all the above? Where do you want to go? And how are you going to get there? And what do you want to be when you get there? So, I don't know. I try and just look at it. I'm trying to be less fixed, but I also think, like, yeah, Dharma's the truth. We look to primordial truth. That's the general direction that we try and aim. And so you want the word to be as close to primordial truth as possible. And what is the, kind of primordial truth of the word is that it's self-combusting. So I'm just saying, this is just maybe a more tantric, like Vajrayana way to look, but I think it's a very interesting and cause pro cosmic resolution, a generative resolution. And I did say before something about cosmology, but I actually meant to say ontology. So I apologize. Okay, Joshua, please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. I was doing some more thinking about the logos, and perhaps also the connection to twilight languages and the language of plants and the green language, because some plants are categorized as entheogens, which means containing God. And so maybe if you consume certain plants or mushrooms, you do have this, what seems to be a communion with the divine. And what I have noticed is at certain profound states of intoxication, like on mushrooms, for instance, um, you kind of do lose the ability to speak, and sometimes writing does become difficult. And I think sometimes when we cross that threshold into that liminal space, for us, we kind of enter into like a Babel state where it gets really hard to maintain order with language specifically. And I've noticed even when I try to take notes or whatever, it'll be very difficult. But when I've trip sit for other people, like that have taken DMT, which I haven't had before, they were trying to talk and couldn't, and making like these howls, like primordial noises, actually, that they don't even remember doing, by the way. But so I think there is some type of connection there with the verbosity, if you will, and the logos, and how all this ties together. But the plants can teach you things about them. And so are they using logos as a vehicle to do this? I think that's interesting, because this practice of shamanism with the plants can be kind of done all over the earth, right? So it kind of transcends the language barriers. So I don't know, just a thought that I wanted to kind of throw out there about maybe the possible connection in some of these traditions. So when you see a plant or something, alongside some of these scripts, there might be a reason for it being there.
Yes, Solar, please go ahead.
Hopefully this doesn't sound too like argumentative, because I don't mean it that way. It's more that I'm trying to insert a distinction here. So I'm wary of conflating like ineffability as like a kind of like fundamental property of things which are transcendent, from the sort of conditional and explicitly conditioned inability to speak based on a certain configuration, mental states, mental energies, stuff like that, such as when imbibing entheogens, right? So one interesting anecdote that comes to mind, and again, I can't say that I verified this. Sadly, I have not gotten to do the experiment myself, where I backpack around India handing LSD to every yogi I can find. But it's my understanding that a fairly widespread phenomenon that was observed by the hippies back in the late 60s and early 70s, when they basically stormed the Indian subcontinent and sort of East and Southeast Asia generally, is that when they gave powerful psychedelics to actually realized teachers that they were able to find, those teachers were basically unaffected. They could still speak, they could still, act normally, right? And there's some really funny and interesting anecdotes to that effect, right? So this is all to say that I think that this sort of like temporary resort to glossolalia, we want to be generous about it, right? That like when we we don't have a choice, right? If we're tripping balls on mushrooms or acid or something like that, that that in and of itself is an indicator of our leader, right? That our sort of awareness practice or whatever we're engaging in, it's not that it's not quite there. It's not that we're not making progress, right? But that there's an inherent incompleteness to that process, right? Like we have not fully, or if you want to put it in like Crowley's language, right? Like we may even have enjoyed conversation with the Holy Guardian Angel, right? But we have not yet completed the process of sort of like merging with it at this sort of fundamental level, right? Like every system is going to use a different language to describe that, right? I actually think that entheogens can be a good shit test, right, of one's relative like degree of progress or stability, whatever you want to say that, right? Like if you think you're an arahat, go trip on Datura, right? Or rather imbibe Datura and proceed to not do anything because it doesn't affect you, right? And if you absolutely blow your mind out and end up in the hospital or in jail, well, I guess you weren't an arahat after all. Like turns out, But anyway, I just wanted to put that out there. I think these things have their uses, perhaps, but I don't want to confuse a temporary condition state with the ineffability of transcendent sort of beyond being and non-being, etc. Right?
I agree with that. I agree with Solar's take on entheogens just ad hoc. I think they give you access to like what you could say is the outer density, or like maybe like more inner ones, but it's not the same thing. And like what it's not gods. It's just spirits. It's spirits of your own mind, you could say, that appear before you in existence appearance, but maybe it's more internal because it's an internal process, or maybe you have visuals, but it's still like exactly what Solar said. Although I do think Solar's being a little harsh, to be honest, not to me or anything I'm saying, or not to anyone with you. I just mean he's being hardline, which is good. It's good because you should be spirit skeptical, and you should be they can become fetters. Anything can become fetters, right? There's so many things. And so it's not just entheogens, but I do think that there is a preoccupation with them. I think they can be useful. And like, I think you can take them and sort of like remove maybe cognitive limits sometimes, just in your mind, just conceptually, just breaking the conceptual like barriers and maybe walking through a few thresholds, but not accessing like the fullness of meaning or being. And I just want to say to Joshua, he did make a really interesting point that is very, very tantric about the sort of the primal animal sounds. This is very common if you look at the tantras of like the yogini tantras, because the primordial sound is the Varahi. It's the boar-headed goddess who speaks Vak, which is gross sound, gross speech. That could be considered decoherent, discordant, like a squeal of a pig. That's often how it's described, or a bear or a wolf. It depends on the goddess, whatever, etc. But yeah, I think that there is something to that for sure. Yeah. Sorry, Joshua. Go ahead.
Yeah, I appreciate that context because it was almost unsettling, some of those noises. And in fact, it almost carried with it like these emotive qualities. Like I almost felt energetically or emotively like what was the vibration of that or whatever. Um, it almost like brought tears to my eyes. Like it was like wow, what is this? It was like some cathartic thing this guy was going through. But anyway, I just wanted to man, I had another thought and it slipped my mind, but it was relating to the entheogen discussion that we were having. So, oh yeah, I remember now. So I recently came upon the one of the biological explanations was that some of these substances shut down basically the control center of the mind, and during this reboot process, when everything would normally be relayed through this control center, you kind of think of that maybe as the super ego in a sense, this where the two hemispheres are uniting. So when that's shut down, all the information that you're processing is then rerouted, but through different areas of the brain that it wouldn't normally go through. So think of it as like road work. There's a detour. So you can't take the normal route you take. Instead, you got to go through all these various neighborhoods and stoplights and intersections that you wouldn't normally go through. And in the process of doing that, you're learning a new route, you're gaining new information, so on and so forth. So there is some, I guess, basis for that being how the entheogen acts upon you. And it's during this period of time you experience like that phenomena of ego death or a selflessness or, something like that great introspective experience. Um, and so I think maybe with the yoginis is they've achieved that already and probably already, toward the neighborhood, so to speak. With the scenic route, so to speak. So maybe that's why in this state, if you're not yet prepared for it is kind of like a stumbling babble experience because you're unfamiliar with all the, areas around that central control unit. And so I think that's why some people can't really handle those things is because they're not ready for it. And so maybe that's a possible explanation for how it acts upon the brain.
Well, of course. So you did say something, of course, that caught my attention, yoginis. So I'll just say it really quick, is that of course they're like self-rising and non-dual on the carnal ground. So when they, not all of them, but when the animal-headed ones speak, it doesn't have to be coherent because they're pre and post conceptual, depending on if they're enlightened or not. I know this is very uh, Buddhist autism, but I mean that's how it's considered. Is like the obviously a post conceptual, like enlightened Dakini is non-dual. So it doesn't matter if their word has meaning. It doesn't matter if we can discern if the word has a dualistic meaning because the word has a non-dual meaning. So it's primordial. So, anyways, I just want to say that. But yeah, I think you're right about the other things. It's interesting. It's interesting. I don't know if I agree or disagree. Anyways, Mike, please go ahead.
Sure, thank you. I just want to share some of my experience with psychedelics, and Joshua, you everything you've been talking about with the like logo in a way where you can't speak. I every time I like, especially the early times I was doing mushrooms, I wasn't fully aware of it yet, and I wanted to journal my experiences when I was doing mushrooms, but every time I did it, I couldn't think and I couldn't speak. So I ended up just going and feeling the experience, and it does make sense that it almost like blocks out that logical layer and allows you to go deeper, and it can be so terrifying for a lot of people where they can't handle it because a lot of people, especially that don't meditate or don't have some type of like reflective process, they never go deep enough to see these things. And when you're like suddenly brought with these layers of yourself that have been repressed, it's terrifying. I mean, nobody wants to be told that they've been doing something wrong or that some aspect of themselves is like fundamentally wrong. So when you do mushrooms and like that logo, it's like your mind is like suddenly like just turned off, and then you're like enter that lower area. It's like very terrifying. But at the same time, when it when people talk about using psychedelics to enter like spiritual states and things like that, I think there's definitely a limit to it. And I've met some of the worst people that have done like ayahuasca retreats and do psychedelics. Like it's not a solution to everything. It's like it's a very like specific tool with specific uses. Um and it's never going to replace like a deeper, in my opinion, it's never going to replace like a deeper spiritual um ascension in a way. I don't know how else to articulate that, but like something that has been worked through like through meditation, um through like years of practice, like you're not going to get that with psychedelics. You're going to get something, but it's not going to be that.
Thank you so much, Mike. Okay, Solar, please go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to. I was going to say this in response to Joshua, and it's what Mike just said. Even puts an even more intense like meat on this. Um, so one thing that I notice starts to happen as soon as people start, even people like us, right? Even people who are like in the gray lodge who are definitely not like reductionist materialists, right? This thing starts to happen when we start talking about like psychedelics or whatever, stuff that alters like how the brain seems to be working, right? At least because as modern Western people, we understand psychedelics not as like imbibing like spirits of the jungle or whatever, but like we fundamentally view these things like as Western modern men, right? Like we can pretend that we don't, but we do. And so what happens is we end up importing essentially that like materialist framework for understanding and thinking about consciousness. Now, I'm not saying that there are no like, there aren't any potential like neural correlates of consciousness, or that like the functioning of various parts of our brain like has an impact on different things that are offered up by the sensescapes. Like I think that's pretty like obvious, right? That's pretty inarguable. But at the same time, like I can only speak for myself, right? But I am principally interested in what operates independently of and is primary to anything physical, right? Like for a lot of reasons, right? But also like mainly because I plan on dying physically at some point, right? So being able to sort of like modulate and manipulate various patterns of neural activity, that's only going to get me so far. All of that is at best provisional and potentially helpful in my development or in my sort of like understanding myself, et cetera, right? Like obviously, while I'm incarnated as this guy in this body, I care a lot about what's going on at the neural level. But bigger picture, it can't be the end goal. And again, I know I don't have to like convince you guys of this, but I just want to sort of point out how we sort of, as a group, even Magical Lodge on the internet, slid right back into sort of like thinking principally in terms of like neural activity as being like what ultimately gives ground and like allows consciousness or awareness to arise, right? Which for me doesn't work, but I don't know.
Well, I hope that I don't do that because I don't feel like I do. That's why I try and stick to more trad dharma in my own practice and my own thinking. But I agree. I mean, absolutely. Look, when Mike was talking about like doing mushrooms, like that's not my experience at all. And so I'm not disagreeing with Mike. The only thing I'll tell you right now, the only thing that happens to me when I do mushrooms is I talk a little more, and that I see the colors like with greater splendor. That's like that. That's 100% the truth. I don't have any visual like flashing. No, like aliens come to visit me. No spirits tell me things. It is literally just the colors just intensify, and I see light a little differently. But it's not like a hallucination, kind of like different. It's just maybe I'm seeing a different vantage point, angle, or perspective of the same thing. So that's pretty much what it was for me. So I want to say that, but so I don't consider it like just I don't think of it as like a, it's both. It's non-dual, right? Like it's just like a thing that we take that we know is separate from us, but then there's something that's also connected to us. It's like it's in a dialectical relationship with us. So, but I think we're more in control of it. I think that's one of the problems with some of like the 60s and the 70s, like thinking on psychedelics, or they thought they were totally in control of it and like you could just like use it as a spiritual tool, a key, or a bludgeon, maybe just to like ram through the gates at every turn, which you obviously can't do. So I think it's like it's a subtle approach to something like that, and we probably overuse it. Like I mean, I don't really take. I did like a small bag of mushrooms for my birthday, then I will never touch them again for a year. So that's basically where I was with that. But I just, I just sometimes you need the little thing. Maybe not. Maybe you don't need it. Maybe someone who's well moderated doesn't need it at all. But maybe someone also wants to just like tap in to see if there is something to adjust, and maybe it gives like a more rounded view of the quote unquote quantum. I'm just saying, I think that there is a somewhat of a truth to that as well. Like if we, like for me, if I say I'm like I practice Tibetan Buddhism, for me, then I have to like acknowledge that like yeah, there are more dualistic kinds of practices on the carnal ground. There are shamans, and there are people who do this kind of thing. I don't necessarily have to understand it or believe it in the same way. I might see spirits as like the manifestations of the poisons of duality. So not really different than the person that they're afflicting. But someone else might see it in like the more gross materialist way. So it's like I think that I'm trying to, for me, I'm just trying to allow the how people want to discuss it. That's fine because I can't inevitably just tell everyone, oh yeah, it's everything's non-dual. You must speak in this way. Like people are just not ready to like to hear a lot of it. I think I don't know. This is my experience, but maybe that's not true. Maybe I'm coping, as the kids say. Okay, sorry, Joshua and Mike and Matt, please go ahead.
Thanks. Hey, something came to mind and I'll be brief. Solar was speaking about the biological biological path working in the brain, and then when you die, it only gets you so far. Well, that made me think of something. So in the scripture, um, it talks about whenever people get into heaven through the window versus getting in through the door. And those who come through the door are the lambs of God, and they have a wedding garment on, so they're recognizable inside the kingdom, But those who come through the window don't have a wedding garment, and so it's if you're using entheogens or drugs or whatever to achieve these ecstatic states, it's kind of like getting in through the window, you know, which is kind of funny because you're kind of naked, right? And I can't tell you how many times on mushrooms I've wanted to take off my clothes. But anyway, I digress. I just wanted to make that point. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joshua. And please, Mike, go ahead, and then Matt.
That's funny, Joshua, because it does when you do LSD or mushrooms, it does make you feel like an animal, where it's like you want to take off your clothes. And when I've looked at myself in the mirror, I've at times regretted it because I just see myself as like this like beast, and not in like necessarily like a negative or positive way. It's like I'm just like an animal, and it's like very, it, it's like too much at times because it's kind of nice to be in like the matrix a little bit. And when you do mushrooms and or LSD, it can kind of take you momentarily out of the matrix where you're seeing yourself from this like third party view. Like if you were an elephant and then suddenly you were like a higher consciousness and you're looking at yourself and you're like, oh, I'm just like a beast and I'm doing these things, and it's this is how things are. And I wanted to share a few of my experiences and a lot of the things that Jin was talking about with his opinions on mushrooms. And mushrooms are very like far ranging, and LSD as well. And I've had many different experiences when they were helpful for me, when they were hurtful, when they've had some type of function. Um, and like earlier on when I was doing them, I was younger. I was around like 24, I think, when I first did mushrooms. And that was a really powerful experience for me because I had a lot of things that I had to resolve within myself. I had like some serious uh shadow parts of myself that were not integrated. So that was hard, and it helped me to bring that stuff to the surface and like really just not to deny it because there were so many things that were I just kept repressing within myself. And meditation was like one of the things that helped me, but mushrooms was like it puts it like right in your face. Like that was extreme. Um and other times when I've done LSD, like that has helped me with like happiness. Where like other times where I was just like kind of struggling in ruts or had certain things, I would just do LSD and bam, like it would just resolve my happiness and it would kind of like refresh my entire system. It's kind of crazy how that works. And usually with a lot of things, it's not that easy where you can't just take a pill and like it solves your problems. But in the cases with LSD, it was. And then somewhat recently, like a year or even like 2 years ago now, I was trying to do mushrooms again. And I wanted to have a more like spiritual progression with them where I I don't even know what my goal was, but I wanted like my shadow's good. I for the most part was like good with like happiness and things like that, but I wanted to resolve things within myself and like reach I don't know, make spiritual progress with it. And during that experience, and I was doing it fairly frequently, I wasn't actually able to make any progress. It was actually hurting me more than it was helping me. And that made me understand like kind of the limitations of uh, LSD mushrooms for my experience. So I was doing it like every week, and it was making me autistic. And I don't know if anyone else has had that uh, experience where it was literally making me autistic like afterwards. Um, such a weird side effect, and it just wasn't helping me regardless. It was making me paranoid. So I had to stop. So in terms of like rewiring your neurons and things like that, like I feel like that lingo kind of helps to explain it, especially when you're talking to like a certain type of audience. But earlier on, like it was kind of, in a sense, like rewiring these neurons within me so that I could um resolve things. But at some point, like your shadow is never fully healed in my opinion, but at some point you do resolve like the biggest things of your shadow, right? Depending on like, especially like the things that happened earlier in your life that you repressed or that you've had to experience. So um after you resolve your shadow, I feel like it is not nearly as beneficial, but that's just my opinion.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Okay, Matt Moura, please go ahead.
Nice. I think I'll use the conversation that we're having also to piggyback on the book on magic in Hod and Netza. And it is intriguing because when we do enter these kind of entheogens, and it can be ayahuasca, it can be LSD, it can be mushrooms, any of them, doesn't really matter. You could say that one of the things that is being achieved, if done, let's say, correctly, is we are accessing the real internet, the aether wave, the whatever you want to call it, the ether, the whatever, right? So how do we do it? I don't know if you noticed, or if you can recall, but whenever you are into that state, which like Solar was also suggesting, you can go there not necessarily with the help of substances. Like that could be one of the causes that why the yoginis would not be affected by it, because well, it's like, yeah, cool, I do this daily. What's the matter? But basically, you are going to silence the character. So try to recall if you ever did something like that. When you were into that state, it's not like you can even recognize sometimes. And I guess maybe that's what you were going into it, Mike, a little bit, the autistic kind of thing. I don't know. I cannot say because I didn't experience what you're mentioning, but it could be that because you, it's just like it doesn't disappear completely, but it gets, the volume of it gets super low. So you cannot hear it anymore. You cannot sense it anymore. So now you get to sense what's out there. Like you created a negative space for the other thing to be there. And like Jin was also asking in the beginning, well, who are you? What's this other thing? If you're not the character, if I'm not Matt Moura, the guy on the profile picture, well, who the heck am I then? So when that guy gets out of the screen, other things come up, and then you can interact and do stuff and so on. And the also what when Jim was talking about the colors, this one, and it's again, if you did enough practices, getting a little bit back into the book and so on, like the maybe some practices that are going to be there. Eventually, when you start meditating, you will kind of start achieving similar colors, similar shapes, similar things, just through breathing, just through the concentration. So you're not, it's different. Like I can imagine now shapes and colors. That's one thing. The other thing is if I'm just concentrated, not trying to imagine anything, breathing, and then shapes appear. That's more like entheogen experience, right? Like you're not there trying to imagine things, things just kind of come up. And then it's kind of a mix if you're conscious, because then you can see it come up, do something with it or not, let it pass. But as it grows, I tend to agree that it's always like a middle path. So either, yeah, most probably normies won't necessarily use it well, won't be necessarily a good thing. But if you do happen to, get the experience to happen in a good way, in a safe way, in a way that works for you, because again, it could be that for some people, some types of energies might be more easy to use first than others and so on. And then perfect, that's completely good. Just to make it another prison, right? Because I completely agree with Mike. It's when you're into it, it should be a relief from this like flesh prison that we are on. But some people use it as another prison, so they enter into it. Like especially in Brazil and I guess other places in Latin America, there's a lot of ayahuasca retreats which become literally like cult-like whatever thing and so on. So it becomes like another thing, right? It becomes another khalifa and so on. So there's always a way anything can become corrupted. So just pay attention to that.
Yeah, I agree with your appraisal, Matt. Of like use it as a tool if you can. There are certain things, but you should be that should be all achievable in like a serious meditation practice. I think as well. I agree with that. So I'm interested to hear what Solar says. Solar, please go ahead. Thank you for waiting.
Yeah, no worries, man. I was gonna say something similar, right? So like, yeah, you don't. It turns out you don't need to like drop a bunch of acid or whatever to see the volume chains, to see the rainbows, et cetera, et cetera. And to kind of build on something Matt was saying, right? Like your how you perceive the world normally. Let's say you're like normal guy, you stumbled on the space, right? You don't know anything, you have no practice, you don't know anything about magic, right? How you see the world is constrained by like who you are, right? Like the sort of like again, if you imagine like the metaphor of like a prism, right? The locus of focus, like your perception is wrapped up in like an identity construct, and the way the world appears is conditioned, and in fact, like they're mirrors of each other, right? Like the perceptual world is a mirror in some sense of the perceiver as the perceiver is being constructed, right? So your what you see or what you don't see is going to be inherently limited by the sort of self, by the sort of perceiving witness, embedded ego consciousness, right? That gives rise to that perceptual world. That's what we mean, or one of the things we mean when we say like these things are non-dual, right? These things aren't separate from one another, right? And so exactly what Matt was saying is, at least in my experience and in the experience of people who have gone a lot farther with this, but in mine as well too, right? Like when you begin to sort of like unbind and unwind that which doesn't mean you cease to exist or blow your brains out or give yourself brain damage. Obviously, we have to say that every time, but that's not what we mean. But as you start to unbind these sort of like the fetters or the limitations, the sort of givens of the perceptual world that maybe you took for granted before, themselves start to sort of unravel, right? And they're directly proportionate to one another because again, they're literally like non-dual with one another, right? So when you start to loosen up, when you start to like afford yourself more freedom, lo and behold, the world appears with fewer and fewer restrictions on how it can be, right? And that's the real magic of the whole process, right? And yeah, it absolutely like should be done and can be explored in really, really beautiful ways, really profound with really interesting ways. Not through the sort of like the shortcut of blowing your head on a bunch of acid for 12 hours, but yeah, through like sustained practice. And in fact, like that can be to a greater and greater extent, like the world, right? Like that is the project ultimately is to I don't want to say exist because again, like, you know, extremes and all of that stuff in Buddhist philosophy, right? But like to have awareness or consciousness mind, however you want to say that, that is truly unconditioned. And what we mean by that is unlimited, you know? And it turns out there's a whole lot more out there that's directly perceivable.
I mean, that's really well said, and I think everybody in the room agreed with that because it's true. That's the truth. That's that is what it's about. It's like about those non-dual experiences, the non-dual ways of perceiving the world, and it is interesting that as a group we have all loosened up considerably. And I never was that prudish, but people would project that onto me, and so I just was be like, that's fine. That's what they want to think. But the other thing is is that I think it's also been a societal shift, and we've kind of come back into a more broader center, you could say. And so some of the extreme views have sort of lost potency, perhaps, in the rhetorical exchange. I don't know, just an idea. Anyways, Joshua and Matt, please go ahead. Well, I'll let Joshua go and then Matt.
Thank you. And I'll be brief. So I was curious, and I understand. Like, believe me, I don't need a shred of proof to believe in something as an Aries. I just like to try and bring it to Malkuth, like grounded in some type of understanding, I guess. That's why I kind of go back to biology and psychology sometimes. That's what my degree is in, after all. But I was kind of curious about where does the magic happen, though? In this conversation we're having about this, entering into these other layers and where the logos maybe resides, is magic inextricably linked to these beaches and logos? And maybe take it a bit further. Can an atheist practice magic effectively? Is there is faith required, or whatever that is defined as? Are there certain prerequisites to get into the door, so to speak? So I was just curious, like, do you guys even know any atheists, for instance, that maybe do practice, or is that even a thing, or how does the logos maybe relate to this? And I have one last thing. And so for that matter, does Saturn kind of factor into this too? Like the relationship between Saturn and Mars with the bones and the blood, and maybe the logos being, because some people use blood for magic, right? And there's sacrificial things and following rules and prescriptions and laws and stuff that's very Saturnian, right? So to get there without the entheogens is very Saturnian in a way, right? Like very disciplined and practiced. Entheogens are kind of like a shortcut, right? So I don't think Saturn would probably like that. But anyway, thank you for letting me share those thoughts.
Sorry about that. I'm going to go really quick. Sorry, Matt. So I want to just answer one of the questions, which was about atheism. So as you were on the roundtable with Ike Baker, you know that he is personal friends with David Hames Smith, who I'm a big fan of, and so he's my favorite Kabbalist, if you want to say that, like my favorite writer on Kabbalah. So he says very explicitly that it is a non-theistic approach if you use the tree. So it's not someone who's like a strict deist either. I just want to be like really clear about this, and this is not like I'm the least like Torah study person. I'm never going to be like that. That's fine if people. I'm happy if other people do. Of course I like that. Like you should study wisdom text and you should study the range of it if you're gonna like do it. I'm a more experiential Kabbalist. That is how I like to travel the tree. Of course, I like the conceptual ideas. It's very important to be able to like not be in unverified personal gnosis territory, which of course can easily happen. So I'm just saying that, but he says it's non-theistic, and from a lot of the people that I've been following, they're also talking about this. It's not necessarily like you're not rejecting God, you're not embracing like the adversarial nature. It's non-dual. That's really fundamentally what it's talking about. Like I talked about this too, Joshua. Like he was like non-duality. Everybody's on to this like thing. Like maybe they have different definitions of it. This is something that like when Solar and I interviewed Gregory Peters, we talked about like the difference between Advaita and like a more Vajrayanist like understanding. It's very hard things to qualify. I'm a word cell, but I'm not that kind of word cell. I'm more like throw it all away, let's burn it all, let it re-arise from the primordial flame. That's cooler to me. So for me, that's how I look at it. But I understand, like we all want to say we're like members of this secret underground black library. Well, you want to preserve the words as they are. So that's also part of it too. We have to be like archivists. We can't just burn the whole arc. We kind of have to know like what is the traditional methods of this and this. And so I think there is a certain way to go back to something you said at the very beginning, like what is the word? Well, Crowley would say the word is magic. Like very, very literally, he talks about this for several pages. And his great work was to reintroduce the word, capital W, of magic with the CK back into consciousness. But this is like a, I'm going to let Matt go, unless Solar, you're going to be really quick. I'll let you go. But Matt.
I just wanted to plug an episode here. It's almost like there's a guy who wrote a really good book called The Languages of Magic, who then went on to Threshold Saints and was interviewed by Jin and myself, Mr. Toby Chappell. People might want to check that out. They might find that concept interesting, expanded into a little bit more depth. That's all.
That is a very seminal and great episode. I really love that episode. Strange angles. I went very H.P. Lovecraft on that. Thank you, Solar. Appreciate that. Okay, Matt Moura. Sorry about that, buddy. Please go ahead.
No worries, no worries. So to go on to some of the stuff that I was writing here to not forget, and maybe first to what Joshua was asking about the atheist. It was actually very funny. I shared with Jin a girl on TikTok claiming she's a atheist that practices magic, and that she realized that her magic practice is somewhat similar to Vajrayana Buddhism. And I was like, okay, cool. You're claiming that, but to be honest, it depends on how you're defining yourself. Because if you define yourself as an atheist, as in I don't believe in God or any God, then how can you work with a God? So either you're being hypocritical or it's just a definition. You don't want to call it God. Okay, cool, call it something else, but you still believe in it because you're using it. So it really comes down to the definition if you want to play with that. Because again, if you want to become super rationalist, cool, it's what like Suda was talking about. If your perception is that you can only reach Malkut, cool, play with Malkut. Don't play with all the other spheres. Completely fine. Wouldn't say you have to believe in a separate God. That's a different thing, I guess. I personally, for example, don't necessarily, not in the way maybe most people that would call themselves theists would believe in a God. But yeah, I think it's just like a definition challenge there. How do you want to define the names or how the things work and so on? Then regarding the blood, again, for many practices, or rather in the word, you need an exchange. So blood is one type of exchange you can do. You can do an exchange with sweat, right? I can work, I'll sweat, and then I'll have my thing. I can cry, I'll have an emotion coming out, I'll have the tears come out. It's an exchange. I can pay for someone, I'm exchanging. I can, again, do anything. I can use to create life. As humans, we have to give out, the precious white liquid, and again, that's energy. You have to give it out so that something else comes. I cannot just manufacture a homunculus without it. I can try to manufacture without the another part in theory, right? At least that's what the guys were trying to do. But I need the liquid. I need the energy to get from somewhere. And magic pretty much works like that as well. I think there is I think no, for sure there is a chapter in the book that he at least talks about it on the blood stuff and so on. But anyways, blood would just be plasma. It's like a good, powerful energy. I would say even some others could be even more, because again, they have more potential to do things. But it really depends on what you're going to do. You don't necessarily need it. It's just, again, how it can work, right? The exchange. Then the DMT stuff as well. It's like our body produces it. So I would say, even it's not that we don't need it because we produce it, but more so we don't need it externally because we can understand how to produce it ourselves, how to synthesize that ourselves when needed, in the amount we need for the thing we need to do. So then it becomes a much better thing than, for example, the thing with, like, let's say a vitamin, right? Instead of you having to take vitamins from a pill, you just eat the amount of things and let your body process the amount it needs, and then makes the rest go out somewhere, right? So I'd say the key for the thing is that, like, the breathing, the body connection, the understanding how it comes, and so on. And then the better you can do it, the easier you're going to achieve, and the less you're going to have an overflow of it, which may cause problems. Which that's why, again, not everyone should just be going and tripping their balls, like Soda was saying as well. And a last thing that I was actually the thing that I wanted to talk about. So you see, a lot of times we'll have problems in life, and I mean we, the characters, because we now, not the character, the one watching the character, the one playing the character, is associating itself with the character. And that's kind of the fun of the game, right? If I'm watching a movie, the movie, I'm going to be emotional about it, maybe, if I'm into the movie, literally, right? If I'm into whatever scene is going on there, if I almost forget that I'm the one watching it and I think I'm the one in the movie. So that's kind of the fun of the thing that we're doing right now. But at the same time, sometimes it gets too harsh, and we don't remember how to get out of it. And again, it's not medical. I'm not saying you should do it. Okay, I'm just saying, just a thought. When you do disassociate of the character, when I understand that, okay, I am not necessarily the character, then I can, from the outside, zooming out, see that, wait a second, the problems or the things exist only in my mind. And it's so funny, especially if you're someone which tends to help others and think, oh, I must help this person, otherwise they cannot solve it. Try this exercise. For the next 2 weeks, say no to everything. Literally, if you see someone and it's gonna be hard, especially if you're doing this for years, it's gonna be hard. But say no. No, 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 no. You're not gonna do anything for anyone else. It's not egoism. You're just gonna see how people can do stuff. That's it. People can do things. Like, we are not superheroes in this sense. Like, oh, we have to do everything for everyone. You can just see it for yourself, and it's so funny because then you start to understand. Oh, okay. Wait a second. I don't need to sacrifice myself sometimes because people will figure it out. And it's, again, it's like when animals go out every day, they don't wonder, right? They don't fear that, oh, maybe I won't have food today. They just go out and get food. Simple as that. Sometimes we overcomplicate it as humans and think, oh, I need this and that. Maybe I won't get to pay rent this month, that month. It's like, just live life. Do what you think you should be doing, and be clear with that, right? The most you can be. And I guess that's there's a lot of stuff in the book that goes into that as well. But the more you can remove the fears, there's especially a phrase in the book. I think it's like, fear is the source of all false perception. And I would say, yes, fear is one of the sources of false perception. I'll say another one is guilt and vice. So if you create this guilt of, man, I shouldn't have done this, and so on, you start to get into some kind of weird state where you cannot really solve the thing that you're guilty for because it's in the past already. So it's like you created a program that will corrupt itself. It will eat yourself. It doesn't make much sense. And the vice is the same, because the problem with the vice is that it never ends. So that it's not that let's say necessarily, let's say gluttony, right? Oh, I'm eating a lot. The problem isn't necessarily eating a lot. It's eating a lot unconsciously and not knowing when you can stop or how you can stop. That's when the vice becomes a problem, because then you cannot control yourself. And then eventually you're not going to be able to do it for whatever reason. because let's say your body cannot take it anymore, and then, well, guess what? Now in your mind, you still have the need, but you cannot do it. Now imagine not being in the dense body anymore and still having the need. Then you can become what someone may call a ghost or whatever, right? You're still here, you still need the energy somehow from that thing, which doesn't even exist anymore because you're not even in the dense body anymore, but you feel the need for it. That's the three heads of Cerberus, the brain. So again, just I would say for those who especially, and I guess if you're into these kind of studies, a lot of people, or maybe the more left-hand path, not necessarily, but if you're into this kind of mindset of, oh, I need to help people and so on, try this, for a week, 2 weeks, and then eventually you can see that you can do whatever you want. Just don't try not to help people, and you're gonna see how easily they can solve the problems themselves. It's actually so fucking fun.
Okay, Matt, I that was really good. I just will say really quick. Well, what are gods? I don't know. I think that all of those things are empty. I think that they are resolved in the one and the zero, and the Yab Yum, return to primordial, return to the Adi Buddha. That makes sense for me. So Ike said all the Egyptian gods are numbers. I've heard other people say that. Obviously, Toby kind of believes that the world is also like Pythagorean and like filled with numbers, and like that's fine. There's so many ways to like sort of conceptually imagine the universe, but I do agree the world is the practice. That is so true. That was a really good bar, Solar. Anyways, sorry, Solar. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I just want to seize on something and also use it to kind of pivot back to something in the book that I would also like to talk about. I didn't see these things coming together though, so I'm glad it came this way. On the subject of exchange, right? So I have used a lot of blood in practice. I have never felt a particular like quickening or energetic response from blood. I still use it occasionally, like if what I'm doing calls for it. I'll be a good boy. I'll squirt some, some red juice over the thing, whatever. But it just historically it doesn't really activate. I just whatever. But something that I have experienced recently, and I'm trying to figure it out. And this gets into energetic body stuff and the sort of complexities there. So in an energy workshop I'm doing, among other things, we're basically playing tag with uh, energy, right? So we are for people who are spatially distributed, right? We're working online. We know each other from IRL, but we don't see each other about once a year. We are so we're cultivating like inner fire, or however you want to say that, kind of moving through a sort of secular creation stage. And anyway, whatever. We're sort of cultivating energy, and then we're sort of, among other things, passing that energy, transferring it to other people in the workshop, right? And one thing that I've noticed on the subject of exchange is that, so when I either call someone into a sort of space of my creation, or when I go to them. So when I put our sort of like, whether you want to say our energetic bodies, astral bodies, whatever system you want to say, when we put those together and I transfer energy, I tend to get an explosive sort of multiplication of energy in my own energetic body, right? So even when I'm not really feeling it, when I transfer that to someone, my system just fucking explodes too. It's awesome, actually. It's almost like a hack to generate to like jumpstart my own tumo, right? Is to connect with someone who's also engaging in these practices, and then start reverberating off one another. It just blows up. It's really cool. It's really like very striking because again, you're able to feel this stuff perceptually, even just like with your gross senses, right? That's interesting in the subject of exchange and sort of multiplication, right? This sort of reverberation effect. However, it also gets into the kind of the weeds of the sort of astral body or the energetic body, what Buddhists would call the subtle body. I find that we might be conflating different ideas, and I'm curious to know like what you guys thought about Crowley's chapter on this, where he puts a very, very high importance on this, but also what he means by the energetic body might be different than what a sort of high level Buddhist practitioner is referring to when they talk about the cultivation of the subtle body and the very subtle body, which are considered to be very high level practices, right? So for Crowley, you're basically perceiving yourself from the outside. You're sort of like building up that sort of magical double, etc., right? The ka, whatever we're calling it. Whereas like a Buddhist, a seasoned Buddhist practitioner, what they can maybe do with their subtle bodies is maybe more profound and more robust. Maybe what Crowley is talking about ultimately matures into something like what the Buddhist is describing when they're talking about doing like the subtle body work and the 6 yogas, etc. Right? But anyway, and this is relevant specifically to my experience, right? So when I'm sending out my, let's say, my double, let me just use that language. Okay, so when I'm sending out my double to go meet with my boy and transfer energy to him and do the little cool reverberation thing, I'm still very much aware of my, right? But the transfer of energy is happening in this double that I'm sending out. But then when that reverberates back to me, it's as though I still have an energetic body that's in where I am in the ritual chamber, right? You can perceive multiple things at once. It's weird, but you get used to it, right? Because this is when you do magic, you get shit like this all the time, right? So I'm somewhere else, but I'm also in my ritual chamber, right? And I'm perceiving energetic like senses, right, in both places, which leads me to believe that if either there's duplication of the same energetic body or these are different, right? Like, so maybe in a Setian conception, the one that I'm still feeling in the ritual chamber would be called the Khabit, right? The energetic, like what they would call the energetic body, but then it's my Ka, or another, or my shadow, whatever, you can kind of do things that's somewhere else interacting with my friend that actually triggers the resonance. So maybe they're distinct types of subtle bodies. I don't know. I'm just curious to know like what you guys, not just like what you think about it in some abstract sense, but also like what your experiences are if you've done a lot of this work, because I haven't. I'm just getting into it and I'm struggling to like enjoyably, but struggling to like figure out how I should interpret this and what sort of like symbols actually get me somewhere,
I mean, I don't know any high level Buddhist practitioners, but you are talking about something that I know about. It's like it's what the Mahasiddhas were doing. They were doing it in physical proximity, but also not. So some of them talk about this, like Talopa talks about this, how they would like travel to other conceptual carnal grounds, which are actually located. They would like name a place after the conceptual carnal ground, and in a way, it would sort of tie the conceptual space to the material ground. And so they would visit other yogis on the smashana and do this kind of subtle body work. And in some ways, you could say it's like this is like the original tantra as well, because it is we've talked about this many times, but like siblings is like a higher order sort of conceptualization than like the mother father. It's an earlier sort of configuration. So obviously can go very different people have different interpretations of what that even means, but that, yeah, definitely it's very like primordial Kashmiri tantra, sitting on the pile of bones and doing like subtle energy work, and then talking to your guru from afar. That's even what those prayers mean, like the calling the guru from afar. It's not to act, but it is to call him like as a separate object, but it's also to like call that kind of subtle body to yourself, and then be like self-reflexive in yourself, then merge both things, then let it go. So that's how I mean, I'm not a high level Buddhist practitioner, but that's how I would reconcile it personally. But I do recognize historically like things that you're talking about for sure. I don't know the order. I think it was Matt, Joshua, Mike.
Right. So first of all, I'm gonna be biased, obviously, and I'm gonna use the Kabbalah. you could say that Buddhists will reach up to like higher spheres if we are talking as each sphere being a body. Let's put it like that. Let's imagine like a Russian doll, and then each of the bodies is like a little bit outer. The core one would be the densest because it's dense, so it's in the core, and then the outer most you go, the more subtle it is. But it's all kind of the same thing. You could say, in theory, that the highest the Buddhists will go, and some other practices, more traditional ones, they will go up to like higher spheres, right? Maybe even to Qatar or something. But if we are talking the one that Crowley was talking about in the book, I would say he's mainly talking about the one in Yesod, which is the first one that we are gonna encounter. Because first of all, it's something that he, based on how he even calls it, right? Like the astral or like body of light or whatever, and how you interact with it. Because at least personal experience and from what I've read other people or heard from other people, the higher you go, the lesser of an appearance it has. So being a double, it would make sense being in Yesod. It's like they even, I think they call it in theosophy the double etheric or whatever, something like that. And so I guess it would be more like just a matter of where you're placing them. So I'll say yes, the same ones as the Buddhist ones and so on. Maybe not, because he didn't go through the practices needed to go to that. But in theory, right, it would develop at least partially the same thing, at least initially there. But then talking about personal practice with that. So as I gave the example of disassociating, right? I guess that this would help a lot in doing this, because if you cannot disassociate from this body, the dense one, the character one, then it would be very hard to even perceive the astral or any other type of sensing two things at the same time. That's inconceivable if you cannot think of yourself outside the character, right? If I can't think, oh, that I could be around the other place, then how the heck would I sense it? It doesn't make sense. I wouldn't be sensing it. It would be something else, right? So I'd say that that's the first thing that I try to do. The most I can do through the day, be outside of myself, but at the same time, it's this, the thing zone is going out, and it's dissociating and grounding, dissociating and grounding. It's like a plug and play thing. And the more you can do something like that, you start to understand that we have kind of, for each sense that we have with the body, we have a digital sense or a para sense. If we have like vision, we'll have para vision. We have smell, we'll have para smell, digital smell, or something, which is the thing that we can sense without the body. And the more you practice tuning into that, the easier, the clearer it gets, the message to you. And then I think it becomes much easier to interact with the other bodies. And then you can grow and, like I said, go even up, yes, sod maybe to other types of bodies, and then each tradition may give it an idea on that or not, right? So if you go up to 7 bodies only, again, you wouldn't have the whole tree. That's completely fine. Depends on how you want to place it in the tree as well, because some place like let's say hot and it's not as one body, and then Givra has it as one body, Bina, Chokmah, one body, and so on. So you kind of would have 7, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, you kind of would have 7, but then Keter would be the high octave of that, and so on. So again, it depends on how you want to place it. But it's very interesting that there is, so it kind of, it makes the game fun, but it takes a little bit of the fun of the game at the same time. Because if I'm disassociating, then there's not really problems anymore, right? Any stress that the character has doesn't really exist, and it can be solved super quickly because you're always connected to the other side, and getting inspiration and getting what you have to do and so on. So it gets cool in the sense it's almost like a cheat code. It's almost like you did slash god mode in the game, slash no clip, and you're just doing stuff. But at the same time, if you want to play out the drama a little bit, then well, it's hard because you cannot, unless again you enter into the character and become the character again. So I'd say it's an intriguing thing to do, because the more you do, the better you get, and it's harder to do it when there's high stakes. So, for example, if you try doing it, if you're practicing any martial art or something, and you're fighting, it's gonna be pretty hard to not being the character if you're getting punched in the face, right? It's gonna be pretty hard to not let the reptile brain say, I wanna, defend myself and so on. But it's a good practice, and again, I think it's crucial to do all the things that we want to do magically. I'll say it's at some point it's going to be crucial to develop that, because as we all know, magic is real, and magic is not lighting up a candle or an incense or saying some words. Like, that's not the magic. That's maybe part, and it can help you do the magic, but that's not the magic. I think for us to do the magic, that has to become like a crucial part of the thing. Developing those, clearly see it, to imagine it, but also the connection with the body, which would be what we were talking about, the breathing, the gestures that also he goes about in the book, the gestures, the speech we were talking about, the logos creating through the voice and so on. So we need the synthesis, otherwise we wouldn't be in a dense body, right? It doesn't make sense. So we need both to create stuff here. And I guess that's what I had in mind.
Well, that was really great, Matt. I wanted to address the blood thing because I never really was able to. So, obviously, Crowley talks a lot about this. The blood is the life. He's like, this is explained by the Hindus. Well, which Hindus? By saying that the blood is the principal vehicle of vital prana. Okay, well, it's not the principal vehicle, it's one of five. This is just a basic tantric sort of configuration. And the vitality is actually found in the alchemy. Of all blood, what the Buddhist tantrics actually posit as the highest kind of blood is not actually the blood of sacrifice at all. I know, all of pagan Twitter just quote tweeted me and was like, we hate him. Okay. But they did say, and people are going to think I'm a freak, but they did say that starfire is the greatest kind of blood of all. And I think this bears out, and I think that you can see this as a clear folk magical analog, where menstrual blood is in fact used universally, basically, for gross sorcery, but also perhaps higher sort of ways to, navigate ritual methodology. So, Joshua and then Mike, and then we'll begin to close.
Yes, thank you. Well, first I'll comment on what Matt was talking about. It, like not being in character when you're receiving a punch. It's kind of hard to dissociate in that moment. You reminded me of the movie Fight Club, because this is not maybe something that I guess I would have realized until now, but he has to dissociate, to go through a lot of that stuff. And he does have a place he goes, right? Isn't that where the penguin is? And it tells him to slide or whatever. But yeah, so I think that you're right. There's some type of an ability there to dissociate that gives you access to other things somehow. And he would even refer to himself in the third person, like he'd say, "I am Jax," whatever. But anyway, but what Solar was talking about earlier about exchanging the energies with the fellows in his group. It reminded me of the 100th monkey thing, that where the monkeys were on an island but separated, and some of them were washing yams in the salt water of the sea. And even though some of these monkeys had never physically met, they began practicing the same behavior in disparate locations. And so the idea was that they were achieving a critical mass of sorts, where enough of them had begun to engage in a behavior that somehow it had like a influence, through a layer. Like you said, how far out do these layers exist? Well, at least this on the collective level here, these monkeys were transmitting yam washing. And so maybe in that, I was just curious if you guys, when you transmit knowledge, have you experienced anything like that? And then I was thinking also of how similar this was to the Bene Gesserit sharing of knowledge, because they would do that when somebody would die. They would pass on the knowledge or whatever. So I wondered if maybe this was somehow used in, any old practices that we're aware of, like, do they try to pass on some type of knowledge? And, that almost reminds me of like the succession of laying on hands with the prophets. They claim to go all the way back to Pentecost, for instance. The digital twin thing also kind of came, or excuse me, the twin thing came up, and it made me think of the digital twin that Palantir and them are creating today, and how it's like they're trying to do through technology some of these things that are in magic and also in the spiritual realm. And so it's like, for those who are not yet there, they're taking advantage of them, becoming like gatekeepers. It reminds me of that scripture where Christ admonishes the Sadducees and Pharisees for putting stumbling blocks in front of people, and I think in that way, that's kind of what they're doing. It's like, oh, you'll never be able to do magic if we lock you into this matrix digital twin prison, and so I don't know. So that was just a thought that kind of came across my mind. And then the final thing was about what Matt was saying about saying no, trying to say no. I actually experienced that today. I had to tell the same person no 3 or 4 times, and then he even asked me the last time, "Are you sure?" And I was like, and I found myself raising my voice toward the end of it, and I was like, because I felt like it was that emotive quality was needed to. Are you sure? Well, if I add some emotion to it, will it be convincing that I'm sure enough then? And that was after that, it didn't happen another time. So I think sometimes there is some type, and I was like, man, is that like a spiritual test? Am I being harassed? And so, and it reminded me of the only other, well, not the only other time, but another time very much like it. And both times it was somebody offering me pizza that covered in sausage and pepperoni and stuff, knowing that I don't eat pork, And so it's like, why do I have to tell you like 5 times no? Like even under normal circumstances, that should seem appropriate. You don't want any? Okay, fine. But it's like, if you're trying to practice something, you come up against all this opposition, So whether it be a fasting from like vow of silence, celibacy, foods, whatever, saying no instead of yes. Because if your normal state of being is to be servile and serve, like that's kind of how I am in a sense. That's my love language, I think. By not doing it, now you're doing what's against your nature, and that's where the growth kind of comes in sometimes, right? Is doing what's contrary to it. But anyway, I just wanted to kind of mention that, because I no is not something I say very often, but what it did also remind me of is sometimes I won't respond to their initial request just because I know they'll figure it out. So I try to only help when I think it's necessary, because I've learned that if you do for people too much, they won't do for themselves. And it's just like the human body, where if you take something
Joshua, you just cut. Solar, do you want to respond? I bet Mike had his hand up, so I'll let whatever way you guys want to go.
Yeah, why don't you give Mike go, and then I'll respond once Joshua can hopefully reconnect and hear,
Okay.
because I wanted to respond to a question that he asked specifically.
Okay. Okay, Mike, sorry, go ahead.
I'll go quick. The discussion has progressed so far, and there's so many things I want to comment on, but there's like it's gotten to a point where there's too many things. So I'm just gonna comment on some things Joshua was saying before he cut out. And then there were some things about in solar and I mean everything is connected, but Joshua was talking about like all these weird incidents where somebody offering him sausage pizza and then like sausage pizza and then thinking about the like synchronistic like reasons behind like is there a lesson behind this? And I've had some like very I try not to go too far into the deep end, but sometimes it can be nice to see like the positive in like a negative experience where there could be like we're a very limited consciousness and there's higher consciousness things going on. There's like chess pieces being played in different ways, and I like to think that I can see the bigger picture a lot of the times, but there's bigger pictures that are beyond my understanding, teaching me lessons and ways, and a lot of times they can be hard. And Matt was talking about too as well, and trying to um, not be pushed around too much by forces essentially to try to ignore things. And I think that's a big lesson that we all have to learn, but I've especially had to try to not be triggered by stuff. And I don't even think I'm someone that's easily triggered, to be honest, but especially when you're meditating, meditation progress can be so fragile, and it can literally be obstructed by any reaction, like any like strong reaction. And a lot of the times it's not in what I've noticed, because I've been trying to do stuff for a while, and I've had a lot of progress in instances, and I've seen progress go away in literally a day because of either just not doing something. Like, because meditation, you have to like literally you had to do it like an hour in the morning and night to like make like some like serious progress. And if you miss like one fucking meditation, like you can actually lose like all your fucking progress with that. And not literally all, like it's a little bit more complicated, but like if you're with certain things, and or if somebody's like if you're reacting to something happening, then you lose it. And this has happened to me so many times, and I have a very chaotic family. So there's a lot of like things constantly challenging me, and I feel like this is like a lesson that I have to like overcome, where it's like it is hard with certain things, but you it is possible to not react to things and to like try to maneuver around them in the best way possible so that you're not to say no, like Matt said, in certain ways. And there was the things that Solar was talking about were very, very interesting. I have a lot of questions, and we're at the end of this now, so I don't want to say too much more. But when Solar was talking about, I am curious, like if you're specifically astral projecting, or if it's like a type of what's it called? Just like I guess
Bilocation?
I can't think of the not by location. When you're like envisioning something in your head and you're seeing whatever. Anyway, so the point is, I'm just curious about that, and I've read a lot about experiences from the Magus of Strovlos. I think that's a really fantastic book, and if you haven't read it, I think you should, because it's one of the best books that I've seen of like an actual like powerful spiritual person like talking about their experiences. And the thing with a lot of very powerful spiritual people is they have this tendency to not want to be in the spotlight. So you don't see a lot of content, like good content about it. I mean, on one end, there's not a lot of people that have been able to do things to like a certain level because we're just like in a weird state where we are right now. But on another level, a lot of people that are able to like reach these like really powerful states that can do things that are like crazy. And I don't even want to say them right now because I mean, the extent of what's possible is just sounds ridiculous. But um Dusk at least just talks about his experiences with just like astral projection and like his experiences of like projecting his double and how when he was able to like project, he would even to the level that he was projecting, he was able to like feel like if he was hit like in his the astral body he's projecting, like he would feel it in his physical body, and he would have marks on his body, his physical body, when it was not on his physical body. And he shares a lot of like really cool experiences, but I'm not going to say anymore because it's like very in the deep end. And this, I mean, this is like very appropriate for this spaces, but um, I don't want to be on the record saying some crazy shit. So
I just want to say something really quickly about the externalization of the body, of like, space is infinite and empty, so you can traverse within it within a subtle body. That's how we would say in a higher yoga. That's what I would say. So there is no real like, you've defeated the Time King. Like, you've defeated him. Okay, moving on. You're in space. What is space? It's infinite. It's in awareness. It's in love. It's in all those things. So yeah, you can easily traverse in it. Now, what is that is able to traverse in it? There's different stages, different like Bardo stages, you could say. So I think that I think Buddhism resolves a lot of these issues for sure, for me at least. But I think it's interesting hearing what everyone says, and I do have a response to the subtle body thing, but I'm gonna let Solar go. Okay, Solar, go ahead.
Cool. Yes. So since we're late into the space, I don't mind going full schizo hours here, right? Like you're along for the ride, right? If you're still tuning into this. Yeah, so let me answer Josh's question and my question together. So I'm not particularly good at this, right? So for me, for the stuff that I initiate, it's basically visualization, right? And particularly, I have a lot better results basically like either putting myself into or calling someone else into a sort of like non-spatially located space, like a kind of like zero empty space there. And again, there's some maybe overlap with different like chakras and stuff. Like it's a little more detailed than that, but like basically it's essentially visualization. The only interesting thing is that like I can do that to someone who isn't necessarily doing energy work, and my interaction with them in that space feels legitimately different, right? Like I get a far, let's say, lesser result if I'm trying to do my little energy transfer resonance thing with just some random person versus someone else who's like also cultivating, like, or really has any kind of spiritual practice, but particularly like doing some bad energy work. So that's kind of interesting, right? Because if I were just like schizophrenically imagining all of this, well, then why couldn't I just imagine anyone and get the similar results, right? Blah, blah, blah. However, and that's pretty normal, but there's this schizophrenic part. So um, I don't mind sharing this because I find it very interesting. So there was I'm not going to say who, right? It's a short list of people that it could be, but whatever. I won't be specific. So there was someone who ended up coming on Threshold Saints, but who had some issues with some stuff that they saw on the timeline, right? And like, long story short, I got basically interrogated by someone um, who was not like physically located where I was. Someone came and said hello, and basically was like, "Okay, buddy, what the fuck is your deal?" And I recognized their presence very distinctly because, so in the Temple of Set, they would say this person has cultivated the Sechem, which is the sort of netter soul of Set. It's a very distinct energy, right? So, and if you engage with Set directly, you get a taste of this, right? Because there's like a certain like resonance, certain frequency, a certain flavor, right? It's very very distinct to this expression of like the mind, if you want to say it like dharmically, right? Like set like any like deity is sort of a certain sort of configuration uh of the sort of primordial gem, right? Seen from a certain angle. Anyway, so it's this like certain like taste that you recognize, and practitioners at a certain level essentially cultivate that sort of Setian dimension sort of within themselves, like taking that sort of within themselves without sort of losing out on other aspects of their individuality. And anyway, so when this person basically came and put me on blast and was like, "All right, what the fuck is your deal?" I'm like, oh, I know who this is. Not like even particular. I mean, I didn't know who it was just because of context, but also like I could tell that this person like had engaged in certain practices over a course of a long period of time, based on this this sort of signature property, right? That I've only ever experienced with people who have worked in the setting, right? Let me just say that. That person could obviously do a lot more than I can do, right? I cannot ruin someone's day or like terrify people by essentially like causing them to experience a sort of mental psychic malaise, have to go into meditation and then be immediately like waiting there on the sofa, like as soon as you as soon as I open myself up to like, okay, what's going on, I felt like there's some other like, you know, something else is present, right, in this kind of mental space. And then the sort of energy of this person was like right there. I was like, oh, okay, what's up? So that's pretty cool. So that is, again, like whether you think I'm an insane person, it's not really my problem. I'm not really trying to convince you of that. I'm simply saying that from my experience, a whole lot more is possible. I am simply not at a point where I can do any of that. And frankly, I'm not really trying to cultivate cool shit for the purposes of like party tricks or the sort of magical initiatic equivalent of party tricks. That stuff comes, I'm sure, but as a process of like transformation, realization, and basically like settling the mind in its natural state, I would say, right? So like for me, I don't want to like present this in kind of a backwards way in terms of emphasis, but to answer the question, that type of like information transfer that Joshua was asking about does absolutely seem to be possible. I just have no idea how to do that. The stuff that I'm able to do is basically like I can tomahawk dunk energy into someone repeatedly and get their attention, which I actually did this past week in a very useful way. Someone needed to get back to me and had kind of gone radio silent on me. So every other day, I basically just like energy spiked them, and they were like, "Oh, hey, what's up, dude?" You know. So, but that's about where I'm at personally.
Well, I mean, I understand the process you're talking about, Solar. Like, this is just deity yoga, because the deity is also yourself, especially if you're practicing like the dragon, Rahulatzah. It's very powerful. He's the protector of the Dzogchen teachings, so it's his natural space to arise in that pristine awareness or that space of the mind. But you also have to set the circle first. So this might be just a difference, that something that we do is we always have the, I guess, emanations of the world, or the, not worldly protector, the the enlightened protector, but also maybe worldly protectors alongside him. They're always visualized in a specific way, rotating around the like yourself, but the mandala in a specific way, which does tie to Crowley and like his emphasis on like the ritual sort of methodologies with drawing the circle of manifestation and all that. Like there is something that we do in our minds to make sure that like nobody's around. Now, does that make me particularly immune? No, I'm immune. I'm stronger against certain things than other things. That's anyone who's going to be particular in a deity, and this isn't because the deity is real. It's because the deity has certain qualities that we can then identify with, and then also self-combust. So, like, okay, what's a good one? Like a good outer deity, like a Mahakala. He's a great outer deity for this. Just to explain it, because he's very rarely self-visualized. He's always frontal visualization. So he serves, like, if you do a Mahakala practice, what it does is it kind of sets that boundary, that Saturnian boundary around you, and like allow you are then become the king of the space, not the space, excuse me, the time. Time conquers space, especially in sadhana. That's not necessarily true, but until you conquer time, so you have to become post conceptual. So that's like a little higher yoga. That's why the yogas are always, they're preparing you to get to these higher stages. But anyways, Mahakal is good because he appears at all stages. So it's basically to set the time that you are in sadhana. He is going to be rotating around the circle. That's the idea. So you do the protector practice first, and then you engage in the higher things. I don't even know if this is addressing anything that you were talking about, but I do think it's interesting because the subtle body is able to do all of these things in sadhana, plus build the mind palace, plus do whatever you're doing, plus, do what if you're doing a deity practice, then that's what you're doing with the deity. You're not doing it with someone that's necessarily here, not here. But definitely you can. Definitely there's so many stories about that. And definitely okay, so Crowley even's talking about this, like the metals can be killed or tired or dried out or dead. Yeah, because they have to be brought back with the most basic of alchemical formulations, which is lightning. So they are buried in a rocky place with like a treacle, a trident, and then they're covered with sand and covered with tektite and like copper bearings and silver bearings and gold bearings, and then it gets electrocuted, and then it becomes what's called a 5-element offering. This is actually the most powerful offering. So what does this have to do with it? Because it's an alloy really at the end of the day, but it has a specific quality that cannot be measured in gross material scientific terms. But someone who's an experienced practitioner in the subtle energies will recognize it. Well, how would they recognize it? A Buddhist would say they recognize it because they recognize the potentiality of themselves or of their own mind. So you're not identifying, you're not clinging. That's a more Buddhist way, obviously, but you're recognizing the potentiality of diamond thunder. And the diamond also has to self combust. Like, yes, the gem, the prismatic diamond, is showing the sort of multifaceted, splendorous nature of wonder, like splendorous nature of the world, but you also have to let it self combust. Because you have to release that primordial bija. You have to let that go. If you want to say Kether, you have to say Kether. But or if we live in the hyperspace kingdom, then it's more like the Shakta Tantra. It's not that the Shakta Tantra is right. It's that the image is Buddhist, but the Buddhist image is so secret that you only ever see it in Shakta Tantra. So the Chinnamastaka image, where the blood is coming back down. So to go back to the blood. But this is just this is post-conceptual blood. Actually has nothing to do with Pashubali or blood or even Starfire at the end of the day. This is like Jodorowsky, like mind palace shit. Like you're watching the movie. There's all these like emulations of blood, like simulacra of blood, and like the ideas and the shapes and the rotating patterns. But it's not actually blood. It is blood, but it's not really. It's that you're visualizing it, you're seeing it, you're believing it. So that's a part of it too. Anyway, sorry, Joshua, and then Matt. Joshua, I can't hear you.
Same. Cannot hear.
Okay, Joshua, try again. Okay, Matt, go ahead, and then when Joshua comes back, if he can do it, he'll do it.
Okay. So I would actually like to try to synthesize, because as you guys were talking, a bunch of other stuff came up. But I don't know if we have a hard stop, because you mentioned we might close in a bit, just thumbs up if we have a hard stop. Otherwise, I'll just riff. So first of all, talking about Crawley and astral projection. If any of you have the chance, I had it. It was super cool. In Austin, there is the library of one of the colleges there, and they have some of Crowley's notes, and specifically there is a note on his astral projections, and it's very nice to read because you see how, well, after the guy wrote a book on how to do it, how he actually perceived it. It's like there's his diary and there's his notes on astral projections. Both are nice. The diary is more of a, well, real life thing, right? Right, is the real life astral projection, the Malkutian astral projection. But anyways, so that's very nice. If any of you who are in the US have the chance, go do it. Another thing, just really very quickly, Mike was talking about the disassociating from the word problems and so on, right? I'm not going to go too deep here because it might be super tangent, but I was watching this anime. I finished it today. It's called Sea Control, The Money and Soul of Possibility. I posted about it in the timeline because I saw it on TikTok, and it literally had a tree of life in the body of a character. I was like, okay, I have to watch this. And it's just 11 episodes. But basically, it shows, and Mike, if you have the time, it's just 11 episodes, super quick. But it shows how a lot of the quote unquote problems that are created are not even in people's hands, in the sense that if it happens, like something happens, like a crisis or whatever, there's literally nothing you can even do about it. Like people will literally in the anime, they'll just like stop existing. That's their allegory, right? But they'll literally just stop existing. So if you see it from that lens, either you grow up to play the big league, but then you're also not necessarily going to be affected because you're playing the league, right? Or you just accept that you're going to be affected, and then what's there to do, you know? Like so again, watch it. I think it will be nice, but maybe we can talk more about it in another time because there's a lot of cool things from the anime. Then regarding the what Solar was talking about, and Jin as well. First, the pinging people, like Solar said, man, that's so freaking cool to do. Honestly, it's literally, and we all do it, especially with family, right? I'm sure if you have like close family or close friends as well, you think of them, they call you, or you call them and they say, oh, I was just thinking of you, and so on. So this happens already. We just need to understand the technology and use it more. And then when you do, it's so freaking cool because it can be as a matter of seconds sometimes, or like minutes. You ping the person and they'll message you. And it could be someone which has not been messaging for like years, and it happens. It's like, it's just so crazy. So first of all, that. Second of all, the circle thing. So that's actually something I've learned in my Kabbalah classes. That cool secret, just for whoever stayed this late until the space. So you know how to do a circle, right? A magic circle. But what about doing a magic tree of life where you have at least 11 circles, each of them corresponding to the energies that you want to work with? So like Solar was talking about, oh, there's this like Sethian energy, this taste that I can feel. Again, you can probably associate it with one of the spheres. So then you know where do you want to stay and who do you want to work with. I can give an example for Umbanda and Kimbanda. They'll have the Eshus. The Eshu is, it's a broad term. There's like, it can mean a category of spirits or a type of guy. And if it's a type of guy, it's more of a hot thing. So again, if I want to work with a Eshu, I just go into the circle of hot. If I want to work with the like Pombagira, I just go to a Netza sphere and so on. So again, you can have all of them open at the same time. And then if you want to hide yourself or communicate yourself with someone from a long distance, you can go to Bina, for example. Or if you want to protect yourself, you can go to some other place and so on. So again, you can play around with that. If any of you from the lodge would be interested, I could show that in a call or something. I don't know if it's easier to see than to hear, but if you get the idea, just try it and let me know how it goes, because it's also very, very nice, powerful practice, because then you can play around with that idea of like, do you want to attack, defend, like what exactly do you want to do, and so on. And it becomes much clearer if you already have the knowledge of the tree, because then you can just use up the association, right? It's like what Jin was talking about, the deity. Like each deity will have its own things and so on. And again, if you can associate that with the spheres, then it becomes just much easier to handle. Especially if you can then print out the tree as well. That's what I have. Like I have a physical, like I want to do it in cloth. I don't have it yet, but now it's in paper. It's fine. But it just helps with the imagination. So you do have to keep it up in your mind all the time. But anyways, and the last one, like Jin was talking about, the perception of these subtle things. Just to make this more clear, maybe, so people with a materialistic brain can understand. We, a couple hundred years ago, couldn't differentiate between Wi-Fi, radio, microwave, and so on. And now we can. Now we have the tools to see, to measure, okay, this is Wi-Fi, and I can see how good the Wi-Fi is. It's a good connection, a bad connection. Oh, this is microwave. Is it in high, medium, low? Is it radio? Is it AM, FM, like which frequency and so on? So just because science cannot measure it now doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And it's quite the opposite. Like science usually is late for the party. so it's again just giving out points to what Jin was talking about, just making it more grounded, so people may have a reference point. Anyways, man, such cool space today. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Matt, and thanks for bringing that down. I'm just like, I like to be Droyan. I like to live in the conceptual space of Hokmah. Like, I don't know, the post-conceptual space, the smoky palace, right? The bridge between the crown and the rest of the world. So with all that, okay, well, obviously I see hands, so we'll do hands, but no, I think that's good. What Solar is talking about with like the energy work, I think that is fundamentally like very Dzogchen. That completely makes sense to me. Brother Yoga, okay, that's even what it's called. All that, okay. I think that the difference would be is that because we go more into, like when we're doing Maha Yoga, it's more ritualistic, procedural, not necessarily external, but there's elements to externality that are carried through to all three bodies, if you want to say. Even though there are four bodies, as remember Matt and Joshua, I said there are four. We have to acknowledge that there's four. Of course, there's four, but for our purposes, there are three. So so some of the things that like are ritually prescribed to burn. Sometimes you burn certain nectar pills. Sometimes you don't burn the nectar pills. It's not for energetic, like transferring with the deity, but because those those nectar pills have three bodies in them. They have like the gross herbs, the transmutation of the materials, like like all the cakes of light, whatever, like that, all that stuff that goes into it, the barley flour, all that, okay. Then it also has so that's the secret layer, and then the inner layer is the prayers and the ritual timing and the astrological sort of like structure that those things are made. So it can protect it gives like a protection. It gives like a power over like the sadness space. So it's not like it's just I think that the thing is like it depends how procedural you are. If you're going more like we're doing primordial carnal ground, and we're going to see people through their subtle energy bodies, where you can interact with them in these like specific or not in specific, non-specific ways, and like that's like just Buddhism, because that's like just deity yoga, because that's like exactly how you treat dealing with a sick person, or dealing with like your enemy, if you want to take it there, or to you want to call someone forward. And again, the specificity of the deities. So for us, the dragon is a 10th level Bhumi Bodhisattva, but he's not. He's still an enlightened protector. He's not, until like you get to certain yogas. It doesn't. He's just not. He only goes so high. So there's other deities that can actually defeat him. So that's the whole thing I think about Tibetan about Buddhist tantra, is it offers multiple practices to sort of solve different problems, or solve the same problem. It maybe offers multivariant solutions to that. And so the Indians, where Matt was saying, like focusing on the different sephira and be flexible, but like Indian tantrics would focus like specifically on one dakini, or one dakini plus astrological deity, or one dakini, one form of Bhairava, and one astrological deity, and they would hit that really hard for like 40 years. So they may not be able to like conceptually bend to every, like to go to every sephira, if you want to call it that, or every sphere, but they can uh, use the gross and secret and inner powers of that to sort of overwhelm everyone. That's kind of the thinking. But certain deities certainly have higher potentiality. So we've talked about this like quite a bit, not just like in maybe not so much recently, but like Kali in the West gets all the sort of infamy for being having the most prayoga, but she actually doesn't even have she's only fourth most prayoga. So there's like a ritual ordering of how they would even be potentiated. And so if you are accessing the deity, remember, it's just not really a goddess. It's like a dakini. It's like empty, non-dual. But they, so if you're accessing one who has the higher prayoga, you also have to control that kind of feedback, because there will be feedback, because it's a dialectical relationship. So what you're asking of them, if you're asking of them like to do a wrathful thing, or to alter reality in a specific way, well then your perception of reality is going to also be altered in a specific way. So you have to be able to like reconcile that. That's why certain goddesses are considered to be Virasic only. Only people who have witnessed the acts of the battlefield or the carnal ground both. Because only then can their consciousness sort of I guess reconstitute in a way that makes sense. It becomes a non-dual experience, like in and of itself, because you've seen it, you can visualize it, and you can also have that inner relationship with the deity who is also empty. So I know that's a little meandering, but those were some things I thought of. Okay, Mike, sorry, go ahead.
Sure, mine will be real quick. And with what Jin said and the three bodies, that is my understanding as well, because, and this maps to the tree of life, because you have Malkuth going to the physical body, and then you have in between the layers, you have the etheric doubles, and then you have the astral body, and then the noetic body, and each of those can actually be used to enter like those dimensions, and those are the only other two dimensions as far as I'm aware. Like when you astral project, or you're dreaming, or essentially you're in the astral, but you can enter the noetic, which is more abstract, and that's a whole nother story. But um I just wanted to talk about, like, briefly, just with Matt and Solar. So like with energy and sending that, I I I feel like it's more a hindrance often than like a tool. I feel like I'm never trying to, like, I understand that when you think of people, like you contact them in a way, but also And it can be hard sometimes to distinguish if they're thinking of you and they're contacting you, or you're you have an attachment and then like you're contacting them. And I find this is like something I'm often trying to like untangle myself from, because I can often get people like stuck in my head and like entangled a little bit. And then have to like I'll have to untangle it. And I sometimes worry because, but I don't think most people are like as aware of this as I worry about. But I've noticed on Twitter and sometimes with people I don't even know at all, like their tweets will just show up on my feed, and some for some reason or another, like they'll get entangled in my head, and then I'll literally attract them to me, and they'll like start engaging with my tweets, and then I get fucking scared because I'm like, oh fuck, like, I, and I like think like they know, and there's like no way that they know, but still it worries me, and the more you like become aware of like your thought patterns, you can the more you can distinguish it, but it's still hard. It's never, I mean, unless you're like very, very, very psychic, it's very hard to completely 100% distinguish. I noticed a lot of times where someone was like had me entangled and I was trying to get them out of my head. I'm like, stop thinking of this person. And then later I figured out, oh, like they were entangled with me and like they were thinking of me. So it's not always super obvious, but it is interesting to like figure that out.
I think if anything, this discussion confirms for me that I like to stick to the rigorousness of practice. Because I don't want anyone coming to me or my ritual space or when I'm meditating. Like, do not bother me. I will peg your ass. Like, not in a funny way. And like with my multiple very large purbos, which is not obviously dispelling the rumors of pegging. But I'm just saying, and not just the purbas, there will be other things as well. But the reality is like a lot of this is good psychic self-defense is like number. I'm not saying that anyone had a lapse in psychic self-defense. I'm just saying, of course, being on the ghost worlds, it's important to have practices that help elevate your consciousness out of them, right? So, I think that's one sort of way to think, and just like you should like make sure I don't want anyone coming. I really don't want anyone coming to me when I meditate because that's like so you set the practices, you set the intention, and you kind of move through the experience. Okay, solar. Okay, Joshua, please go ahead. I was just being a cheeky asshole. I don't know. I'm just kidding, but you should have some good psychic self-defense. I think that is good. Good psychic hygiene, all of that. Like if it tells you to like fast, take a bath, and like no nut, then that's what you got to do. Just saying. I know that's very explicit for me, but I'm being serious. Like I'm saying for tantra, you can do whatever you want. You will. I always say that. Like it's really important to me because like I don't like there's no like I'm not trying to give teachings. I'm not trying to. We're just discussing a speculative like view of reality, right? Speculative kala chakra, speculative Gnosticism, speculative tantra. You can take of it and make of it, or you can say it's all bullshit. It's all just conceptual garbage, just like words to be thrown into the carnal flames. That's totally fine. That's why I try and use like very simplified, sort of like mimetic catchphrases to sort of like express, not to sort of, to express what I am trying to say, because I just find that it's much easier, better with the fewer words. So that's why I say like good psychic self-defense, good psychic hygiene, just because it gives you like it will enhance your practice because it will also show the stability of like your mind. Like we talked about this, so I brought it up, like the strength of your mind, like how much do entheogens affect it. Like I don't regularly do that much entheogens. Like yeah, I smoke a little pot, but I don't even take an Advil. I'm not justifying, I'm just saying for me there's like there's degrees of intoxicants, and there are like other things. Like there's a lot of food that I just don't eat because it's like too hard to sort of maintain a track record for sadhana. Like I try and eschew like rajasic food as much as possible, and that's not that's not going to be for everybody, because people want to like if people really like that, I'm not going to tell them not to do it. I'm just saying that's for me. But like I know what I have to work on, so all I can tell people is like what I do for myself rather than what to do. So I just think just try and remember the space is speculative, and I do think it all begins in your own mind. And I also think like we are luminous and massless beings made of light, and love is in the space of emptiness. And how do we engage in that? And I think fundamentally that's up to like our perspective or our view. And like end of life practices, this is such an important part of Buddhism. Like it's like almost like a fundamental part of Tibetan Buddhism, especially for older monastics, for obvious reasons. And I think that they prefer Dakini practices. This is just looking broadly, or Yamataka. So obviously, Slayer of Death, or one of the Dakinis who can also arise in the Bardo realm, because that's who's going to be able to lead you through. If you plan on going higher or coming back, some people do want to come back. I'm not saying I do or don't. I'm just saying different people have different terminuses. So you have to allow for the variation, and like what people think they want in like when they're saying it now is not the same as like in 100 years. Like everybody knows, like I love to say Jumi Rinpoche, he was like very pro, and then at the end, like his very end, he was recorded as saying something a little pessimistic. He's like, I'm never coming back to this carnal ground ever again. And so because he's like, I came to bring the word, so I'm never gonna like I'm going to the massless, luminous, like non-returner, like Pure Land space. He liked a specific Pure Land. We won't get. Oh yeah, I think he liked Zamdok Powery actually. The copper colored pyramid. Just saying, in the sky. And so that's probably where he went with the Dakinis, because he was a big Dakini practitioner as well. But he also practiced the Vajrakalaya. So I just wanted to say that. That's why I like really have placed emphasis, like not just Aeon of the Daughter or the other times we've talked on it. Vajrakalaya, not Purba. Vajrakalaya. That's the like left-handed sun practice. You want the Setian, kind of like the Setian deity. He's not the dragon at that point. He's 3 dragons, you could say. He's higher than the dragon himself. He becomes something non-dual. Yes, Solar. Or sorry, yeah, I'll let Solar
Yeah, I
really
was just
quick.
gonna say, like, at some point, not now. We need to kind of get into the weeds of that and distinguish between Vajrakalaya and Purba. Also, like, I have a very personal reason for wanting to make those distinctions clear, but I also think that would be a sort of general interest thing to talk about at some point. Just bookmarking that.
Yeah, it was intended. I mean, I'm always game, for us to have like I love Buddhism the most. So like when you ask me more technical questions on my sorcery system, or the one that I utilize, yeah, that's awesome. We'll talk about that. We'll have a whole space dedicated to that eventually, or a show, maybe a show, but whatever. Matt Moura, please go ahead, and then Joshua.
Yes. Just to tag along on what you talked about, the eating or not eating, or just how treating yourself, it becomes very, or like going out or in, like if you want to stay or go out, right? You can look at the character readings, right? So numerology, gematria of the name, astrology, different astrologies even, and so on. And when you map it to the tree, for example, it's very clear. It's very, very clear to see what the character is up to do here. Doesn't mean that it cannot be reprogrammed. Again, always flexible, always in flux. But with the base programming, it becomes very clear. For example, if one has a lot of Binah and Malkut energies, like is very activated, guess what? You need to be dense. So you, as in the character needs to be dense. So it's not going to be dense by fasting and and doing a lot of incense. It's gonna be dense by being dense, by working with caloric energies. So it really comes down to the body, how it was programmed, and so on, and not understanding that, wanting to just go with the average diet or an average whatever someone tells you to do is, again, it's not going to be super beneficial. So definitely follow what Jin said. Go find what works for you, and if you're not aware yourself, just fucking do a reading. Learn to do it or pay someone, whatever. Just do a reading and start to understand. Also, you can see how the energies are going. Like, are the energies going down the tree or up? So is the character being prepared to be ejected, or are you just in the middle of the mission? Or again, you're still at the start, I don't know, just going. You can understand it as well. So you have the correct expectations. You cannot have the expectations maybe of going out if you have a bunch of shit to solve. Unless you initiate yourself in Kabbalah, then the true one, yeah. Then maybe you get a pass for a couple stays. You don't need to do. But anyways, always up to you, not anyone else.
Yeah, I agree. Unless you're a tantric Buddhist, then follow your guru. That's my words. And or in any initiatic tradition where you have to follow your guru. Like, don't listen to us, listen to them. But I agree with that. I think it's important to sort of discern your own methodology. And I did say Rajasic food. I actually meant Tamasic food. I don't eat a lot, most Tamasic foods, to be honest, including grains, very often. So just wanted to say that. Okay, Joshua, please go ahead.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Wonderful. So sorry about the technical difficulties. I had to restart the app or something. Seems like this week spaces have been glitchy on X. But at any rate, I only had a couple things to mention. So basically, earlier when we were talking about the digital twin and like spiritual twin stuff, I was wondering, can a mirror help with that practice if it's difficult? And also, when observing this twin, is it a mirrored version? Like, is it flipped? So I was just curious about that. Any feedback about that? And then also the other point was like pinging people, as we put it, kind of reminded me of how people will say, "Well, I'll pray for you," and so some people are strict and like, well, you shouldn't pray for people without their permission, or does it even work if you pray without them knowing? So I think you kind of get into the spiritual mechanics of the thing there. And so I think what we might be seeing happen there is, like, if you think about it Kabbalistically, the Tikkun Unlum aspect of it is like, are those chords between the Sephiro, that's the labor or work that we're doing and maintaining between ourselves and other folks or whatever. And it's those where, I hate to sound new agey, but you hear people talk about chords, right, and cutting chords and creating chords. And so maybe it's these energetic chords that we're maintaining or cultivating between the Sephiro. And so for us, a Sephiro might be comprised of various folks that we have various connections to, and those are the chords, so to speak. But if we approach it scientifically, we might get into like things like string theory, or Donnie Darko's thing coming out of his chest or whatever. But anyway, thank you.
Well, string theory is just the new ageification of red string, right? We've talked about this so many times, Joshua. And I'm not correcting you. I'm just saying that we have discussed this like at length for multiple spaces. So, yeah, new age people talk about cutting chords. Are they cutting something? Sure, great. You can't cut karma with gross ritual. Like maybe you're cutting astral connections, sure, that's fine. Do that, great. Freeze a lemon, I don't know. Like, but like you're only getting so far, and those chords are not what people think the chords are not the paths. The path should be disaggregated. You also know this because we've obviously discussed Kabbalah for like hundreds of hours. So if the paths are really aggregated, that's going to be a big problem, and they're going to start to fall apart. They're going to be made in deficit, as we've often discussed. Like the arc is made in deficit. How do you build the arc of the tree? If it's filled with your preconceptions, oh, I don't like this person. Oh, I don't like that person. Okay, why are you sitting around thinking about that person? Like how Mike was talking about, like how we call each other into awareness by thinking of each other. Like if you don't like someone, then just like you don't need to cut the cord. Just don't think about them. Like yeah, maybe you need the outer ritual to help yourself, but like also like you're doing an imputation in the sort of like you're not cutting it cleanly like you're acting like, because you're still thinking of them. You're just using the conceptual act or the preconceptual act, because you're actually physically doing it, the kinesthetic act. You are doing the ritual, and then you're being like, oh okay, I'm done thinking about them. But like what was actually done at the subtle level? Nothing. It's just subconscious. That's only if you integrate it. Do you know how many people, especially girls on Twitter, probably do those like lemon or cord cutting rituals and then are like, oh, I'm then go DM the guy that they're like doing it to? That's probably like all of them. Like the reality is like it's meaningless until it has meaning. Until like it has meaning more at the subtle level, yes. That's why it's also important not to be like strict materialist or strict spiritualist, where you're saying like it's spirits, it's this, it's that. It should, if you understand it more of your own mind, that doesn't mean to the exclusion, but more of your own mind, it will be, a lot of this will be so much clearer. Kabbalah is so much clearer when you start to recognize, like, yeah, wisdom traditions, inner processes of your mind, where it fundamentally begins and ends, which is both Malkuth and Kether. That doesn't mean it's all contained in your gross material brain. No, like Mike said, the three subtle body, like the three body problem. Like if you're a Buddhist, you believe in the three bodies: the worldly body, the quote unquote astral or like higher, like formless body, and then the higher body, which is like totally outside of like conceptual thinking, cosmic body. So like yeah, that's what it all is. Just like people, I know we've talked about this, and probably it's partly contributed to my fault, but like because I use the mythological layer to try and like navigate the ways I think of the world and the ways that I approach Kabbalah, the way I approach like Buddhism. I like the mythological layer. That's the most like makes the most separatic for me. It's the most splendorous of all the stories, rather than strict text. But when it comes to Tantra, you have to look at the strict text as well. But if you know Tantra, they also give you the mythological in the sadhana. So, yeah, I think it's pretty awesome. I think it's pretty cool that, we have to have different languages to speak of these higher processes, but ultimately we do get too conceptual. And sometimes it is good to just conceptually just like throw it all away and then say, okay, Diamond Thunder, love is the cause of knowledge. We're luminous and massless, which is also known as empty, but that's not nothing. And you have to like come together and consent. Like that's like the condensing everything that we're talking about, and also discernment. It's like, yeah, I know you brought up like Palantir. Like, what are the material ways that Palantir is going to affect you, Joshua, personally? That's the true bring it back to Malkuth, not just what you read on Twitter, right? Like it's like the actual practicality of your day to day. Now, I'm not saying that there's nothing, but I'm saying in general, most things on Twitter are bullshit. So that's also true. And so that's that's about cord cutting. It's like, yeah, great. You learned a little ritual. You did a modified, like, little tantric practice or witchcraft practice or druid, whatever. That's great. That's nice. How did you integrate that into your consciousness, and how do you let it, like, rectify your mind and the path itself? Are you calling down the lightning? Are you traveling on the dragon? Are you doing something interesting? We always say, like, rectification and synthesis. Yesod and Tiferet. Where is that? In your mind, your consciousness. But Tiferet can also be understood as your heart. Isn't that really interesting? The sun rules the heart in medico-astrology or astromedicalism. So, like, and the moon governs the, like, sublunary mind, like the mind of, like, that kind of, like, consciousness, the dreaming consciousness. So, like, subconsciousness is how we would call it in more Jungian terms, right? So the reality is like, it is both of those things. It's not discarding or being an ascetic or being like a, total left hand path, like, oh, I'm out to destroy the world. No, it's not about being right hand path and being like, oh, we have to, like, restrict everyone's, like, life and pleasures and everything. Like, you're going to go to a degree, but there can only be a degree of that. You can't just, like, be like this. It comes down to agency, comes down to, like, your own choice, your personal, like, sense of self. And, like, we've talked about, like, one of the aeonic concepts is self-respect. A person with healthy and, like, good boundaries is not going to be swayed by things that aren't degenerate, right? That doesn't mean that you're going to go and be like everyone on the timeline is like, oh, I'm going to start quote tweeting people. Like, I know I'm notorious for doing it, but I'm going to say now I've calmed down so much, and I'm just going to, it's not worth it. It's not worth it to be, like, part of the quote unquote discourse, because it's so bullshit. It just takes you out of yourself, out of your awareness, out of your intention, out of your will. It's pointless. And, like, I was, Matt had a tweet today that I was kind of horrified by, but then I thought about it later. I wasn't horrified, Matt. I'm just being, yeah, I'm being theatrical for the space. But he had the quote of it's the post about downloading books to your brain, and I was like, at first, my first reaction, so I was just gonna say, like, Jin saw it, and I was like, he can't say that. And then I thought about it, and then I was like, actually, but he's not wrong. He's not wrong. If you have higher Dathic experiences, then hopefully you'll be able to maybe not download it literally, Matt, with your brain, but maybe your understanding will be so much greater, so much deeper. Maybe you will hear the inner kind of sound, the sonic quality of the silent word. That is 100% possible. So I think that and, like, Matt's free to say whatever the fuck he wants on his timeline. That's no problem. But I'm sharing the observation that simply because I reacted in a specific way doesn't make what Matt said not true. It wasn't, like, the exact way that I would have framed it, but it's not wrong. It wasn't wrong. Once I kind of weighted it, considered it, went through the Kabbalah, I was like, actually, yes, you're saying dash, the lights, you can see the words on the page. You're going to come to a deeper understanding because you had those Dathic experiences. You kind of have that recognition that it's like there's a more non-dual quality to the text that also comes through experience. So you're weighing that and sort of balancing that in your mind while you're reappraising the text. Yeah, I absolutely think that that's a higher wisdom experience, higher knowledge experience, a Dathic experience, a Vidya experience, but not just Vidya. But of course, that's one interesting way to say it. You meet the Vidya, you meet the Yogini, you meet the wisdom goddess, the Prana Paramita. You can meet her at Dath if you know how. If you know how to look at her, if you look for her, that's one way to say it. Okay, Matt, please go ahead, and then we're really going to close out.
Yeah. By the way, the downloading books thing, I can DM you about it. But anyways, just regarding the thing Joshua asked about the mirror. So there is a practice you can do, maybe today even, if you have some time. Just get a mirror, get a dim light, like a candle will do it, but dim light, not a strong light. Just put it near it. Let the rest of the room be
Matt, you cut out. You can hear him, Joshua? Oh, okay. I can't hear him either. Anyways, I'm sorry, Matt. I guess it's a sign. Well, we're going to close out because I'm getting tired. And I'm sorry, guys. This was a great space. We kind of come back to renewal, right? Because we all missed each other. That's really what it was. You know when the dark cell shows up that he misses our company. I know it. And he's so much nicer to you than he is to me. So, anyways, we won't get into that. No, we love Solar. I'm really proud of his episodes. He actually made up, I totally said this at the beginning, made up some cool words. We're going to see what happens. I did air the Andrew Edwards episode because Andrew is promoting his book, and like obviously Daryl from Martyr Maid is like really interested. So I hope that
Jin.
episode does
If you're
well.
speaking, you're still on mute. I don't know.
I'm muted. You can't hear me at all.
I can hear.
No, you're good,
I
Jin.
can hear both of you.
Okay, Matt. Sorry. Go finish your. Sorry about that. Sorry. Finish your thing. I didn't mean to cut you off. I can't hear you again, Matt. No? Okay. All right, well, we're going to close it, like, for real then. Sorry, Matt. Everybody check out Matt's Ko-Fi. Matt launches Ko-Fi. Can tip him $5 even. That's great. You want to ask Matt for advice. That's just do. It doesn't have to be, like, a huge thing. Maybe your question's not huge. Maybe it's, like, just like that. So that's just an option. I'm just saying. Just an option. Obviously, check out his site, Solar Exile, his 2 episodes, Gregory Peters and Paul Fredericks. And Mike, check out Mike and he's been sharing his NFTs. Of course, check out Joshua. He has multiple episodes on my show. We've got a long running series on the metaphysics of Vidya, video games, where we discussed, well, his first episode, we kind of just like, discourse, but we did talk about Umbrella Corp. So you could say that was kind of like our introduction episode, and then it has become like a longer form series on video games. So we did one episode fully dedicated to Resident Evil. We particularly talked about Resident Evil 4 and Resident Evil Code Veronica. Then we did an episode on Claymore, which is an anime manga, so I guess it's not just video games. And we actually have in the can, which I have ready with a title, with our little Naga Seth from the Lodge, we did an episode on Dark Souls. I know, it's going to be really cool. So look forward to that. And of course, there was the question of Vajrakalaya. So I know Solar's not in the room, but if anyone is interested, I did actually get into a discussion, or heated or otherwise, on the episode that just aired before Andrews. So if you want to listen to that, that one is called Anima Sola. So there was a couple, there was a little time spent on the distinction between Purba and Kila deities, if you want to listen to that. But of course, we will discuss that later. So another time. So then Avi, check out Avi's yoga, longtime lodge member. Yeah, check out Avi. She's great. Bull Brave Free. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate you. Fluxion from the lodge. Thank you so much. Appreciate you very much. And I hope everybody has a great night. Love is a cause of knowledge. maintain, try and be pristine. I think that that's another thing. Like, pristine doesn't necessarily mean like without pleasure in the world, but there might be times where you restrict based on your spiritual practices at the time. People are so against this idea, and I'm not going to go on a tangent about it, but it's that's very normal, especially if you're into magic. Like, just suck it up, Buttercup. So that's how it goes. So that's what you have to do. If you can't eat pork, or you can't eat garlic, or you don't eat this thing, that's fine. Then that's what you do. You have to take a bath, and before you pray or talk to the angels, and you can't be with your whatever. That's what you have to do. So it's not trad larp, and it's not radical orgies in the woods. So it's sort of the non-dual space in between that. So yeah, okay, so that's pretty much it. Everybody have a great weekend. Do your sadhana, do your spiritual practices, mala, mantra, and mind, because time is in your mind. That's why he's the last sort of conceptual king to defeat if you're Buddhist, or if you're more Santana Dharma inclined. He'd be one of the higher formations. So it's just an interesting way you can think of it, and that's why it's important to kind of be able to cultivate in your time. Because time arises in the mind, in the nine, in the Yesod. Okay, everybody, have a great night, and talk to you soon. Bye, Nagas.